Chapter 105. Within half a day, 11 kendo dojos in Nissan Tokyo were destroyed. Each dojo was forcibly broken into by the same person, killing everyone inside including the dojo master and all the kendo disciples, and then burning down the foundation of the dojo. Everywhere, a devil card was left behind, as if to announce the identity of the intruder. Devil Kale. He was like the incarnation of the devil, crushing and uprooting the representative dojo as the cornerstone of samurai, and trampling on the samurai's spiritual support. The people of Nissan Tokyo were shocked again, and while they felt fear for Kale, the intruder, they realized for the first time that the samurai, who was usually extraordinary, was so fragile. Nearly 100,000 armed soldiers went out to search, but Tokyo was too big. It could be subdivided into 4 or 5 large cities. Dozens of famous swordsmanship dojos were scattered in various areas, and it was impossible to control all the military forces to defend. Some strategic analysts from Japan had been trying to figure out Kyle's whereabouts and goals, so they had arranged for their troops to be stationed near these dojos in advance. However, in the next moment, the dojos of other sects that were 10 kilometers away were destroyed. When the army rushed all the way to the scene, only a mess of black charcoal and scorched earth was left behind. They didn't know that with the Blue Eagle scouting at a height of more than a kilometer, it would be difficult for Kale to be surrounded by a large army. After all, people were not machines. Kale, who was in combat mode, consumed much more physical strength than ordinary people, but with the super soldier's physical fitness and self-healing factor, his physical state could be recovered quickly. But once he fell into a large army that was already armed and prepared, it was impossible for him to wipe out the enemy alone, no matter how strong he was. He would consume his physical strength in a prolonged stalemate, and there was no time to relax and rest. And continuous intensive artillery attacks would exceed the limit of the venom protection and the resistance of the mutated body, and the recovery speed of the self-healing factor couldn't keep up with the new injuries, and there was also the possibility of death. Kale had enough understanding of his own strength, so he wouldn't put himself in that kind of life-threatening situation. While he was playing hide-and-seek with the large army in Tokyo, he consecutively destroyed another 5 swordsmanship dojos that were undefended. In total, he had destroyed 16 schools. Nissan had lost so many sects in one go. The last time was in the Edo period 100 years ago. One could imagine how big of a blow this was to the people who prided themselves on being samurai. Commander Sasaki, who was in the command center, was anxious. He sent messengers to the remaining dojos to persuade them to abandon their main dojos and head to a safe area to take refuge. That's right. In the eyes of the country, Kale's threat was no less than a natural disaster. However, the dojo, which represented Bushido, unanimously rejected Commander Sasaki's persuasion. For them, in the face of a powerful enemy, death was not terrible. What was terrible was being afraid before the battle. If they abandoned the main dojo out of fear, wouldn't they be abandoning the samurai spirit in their hearts? As long as the sword is here, the person is here. As long as the person is here, the tavern is here. This was the unanimous reply of the remaining members of the dojos. They felt that they had a lot of backbone. When Commander Sasaki heard about it in the military headquarters, he almost cursed out loud. For the first time he sighed in his heart. Bushido is harmful. It's too pedantic and stupid. It doesn't know how to be flexible. If the enemy was someone else, it would be fine if there was a chance of winning. But it was Kale. In less than 2 days, the name of the devil shrouded and suppressed the entire Tokyo Nissan. Do we really have to wait until the last few dojos in Tokyo are destroyed before we can gather the army to arrange the defense? Commander Sasaki had a headache. Just as he was thinking about what to do, a communication soldier rushed in excitedly. The communication soldier saluted and said, "Reporting to Sir. We have just received the latest news. The ninja organization protecting the Emperor has left the Emperor's mansion and is secretly operating. They are requesting our cooperation." Ninja? Commander Sasaki was stunned. Then, with a smile on his face, he laughed and said, "It seems that the Emperor can't help it anymore. He even sent out the ninja who has been protecting the Emperor's mansion for a long time." Ninja, that was the elite of the elite, the samurai of the samurai. Every member had power above ordinary people. Unfortunately, this organization only listened to the orders of the Emperor. It was not an armed force under the jurisdiction of the army. Commander Sasaki said coldly, "Cooperate, of course we will cooperate. In this battle, we will use all our firepower and weapons, ignoring public property and civilian casualties. No matter how much we have to pay, we must kill that man in one battle." Nissan, Tokyo, Kanagawa District. This was the border of Tokyo. The buildings on the streets were far less prosperous than the downtown area. Coupled with the invasion of the demons in the United States, there were very few pedestrians on the road. However, there was a dojo that was enough to be ranked in the top 10. It was rumored that the Hojo Itoryu raised the demon sword, Murasame. Kale came to the door of the dojo and was surprised to find that there were no guards at the door of the dojo. The main door of the main dojo was also kept wide open. Were the people inside evacuated? Kale didn't care. The people of the dojo stayed to defend or retreated. It didn't make much difference to him. Destroying the dojo and erasing the foundation of the self-proclaimed Bushido was his purpose. Kale's face was expressionless. He returned to the original appearance of the night battle suit and stepped into the main dojo coldly. When he walked into the yard, he found that the people of the dojo had not evacuated. Instead, they were kneeling in a neat row in the main hall. A middle-aged man in a black kimono sat in the front. About 50 black-clothed swordsmanship disciples sat behind him. They all closed their eyes and rested. "You're finally here. We've been waiting for a long time." The middle-aged man opened his eyes and looked at Kale standing straight at the door of the main hall. "Demon Kale, come to challenge." Kale smiled and said his usual opening remarks. "I, Hojo Maru, the 21st dojo master of the Hojo Itoryu." The middle-aged man picked up the scabbard Nissan sword beside him, stood up slowly and said firmly, "On behalf of the Hojo Itoryu, I accept your challenge." When his voice fell, the 50 swordsmanship disciples behind him also stood up together, holding the swords that had already been prepared and were ready to fight. Hojo Maru said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "I know that I have no chance of winning against you alone, so our people will fight together." "That's how it should be." Kale nodded with satisfaction, and his eyes fell on the Nissan sword in the man's hand. He said with a little interest, "Is the legendary demon sword Cursed Blade in your hand?" "Exactly. Cursed Blade shouldn't be unsheathed. Unfortunately, it's a matter of life and death for the Hojo Itoryu, so I can only use it against the ancestors." Hojo Maru said, holding the scabbard in his left hand and the carefully carved hilt in his right hand. He pulled out the slender cursed blade inch by inch. Kale looked at the so-called demon sword. The hilt of the sword was carved by a master of the art level, and the blade was as bright as a mirror, shining with a cold light. It looked very good. With the level of craftsmanship of the ancient Japanese, it was almost as good as the sodium carbon steel one-handed sword forged by Howard with high-end technology. Chapter 106. This dojo was different from the previous ones that overestimated themselves or adhered to Bushido. It was like they were very aware of their own weakness and understood the strength of the enemy, so they were determined to fight to the death. "Then let's get started." Kale stared seriously and crossed his fists in front of his chest. 6 dark claws protruded sharply, and the venom suit also entered a fully covered combat state. His dark body, which seemed to be born purely for fighting and killing, released a cold and oppressive aura, which was daunting. "All the disciples of Hojo Itoryu, listen to my order. We will live and die with the dojo today, and we will fight until the last drop of blood is shed." Hojo Maru shouted, holding the cursed blade in both hands in front of him, and the swordsmanship disciples behind him also pulled out the swords in their hands with the belief of death. "Kill?" Everyone in the hall of the dojo roared, raised their swords and rushed forward on their clogs. "Come on." Kale smiled coldly and didn't have the slightest intention of evading. He lowered his body and sprinted, choosing to fight head-on in a one-versus-many fight. He was used to large and small battles, and for him, it was like a habitual thing. Kyle sped up and rushed into the group of warriors, quickly raising his right hand to block in front of him. Suddenly, nearly a dozen swords slashed forward and slashed at the vibranium arm guard. With the characteristic of absorbing external kinetic energy, it easily blocked all the slashes coming at him. He waved his right claw horizontally downward, and several samurai within half a meter in front of him immediately screamed and fell back to the ground while covering their abdomen with blood. This was just the beginning of the bloody battle, and soon other samurai stepped forward to fill the gap. Several Nissan swords fell on Kale's defenseless back, but they didn't break the tough protection of the venom suit. The samurai opened their mouths in horror, and in the next moment, their bodies were torn apart by sharp claws like paper, and minced meat and blood splashed. Kale seemed to be repeating the same battle as before, ignoring the enemy sword attacks. Even if his body was injured, he didn't care, immersed in this killing like a monster. After nearly 10 samurai died and fell to the ground, Hojo Maru, who was mixed in the battle, finally couldn't help but shout, "Do it!" Surrounded by so many samurai, Kale looked up with his bloodshot eyes. Just as he was about to search for Dojo Master Hojo's figure with his gaze, two faint sounds of wind breaking entered his ears. In his field of vision, the two dart-shaped concealed weapons were constantly enlarging. They exploded at a speed faster than ordinary bullets and were about to hit his eyes. With the reflex arc of Kale's super soldier, it was too late to dodge this hidden weapon attack that was impossible to guard against. He could only close his eyes quickly, and the dart pierced his eyelids that were protected by venom, giving him a subtle tingling sensation. Now, Hojo Maru and the other 9 samurai, who had been pacing back and forth in the rear of the battlefield and waiting for an opportunity, quickly stepped forward and approached Kale at a speed far greater than before. Their movements were swift and powerful, and the moment they passed by Kale's side, they slashed through the air and broke through Venom's protective skin, leaving 10 thin and long bloody marks on his robust body. He was careless. Kale calmly closed his eyes. He sensed that the last samurai was about to retreat from his shoulder. He quickly reached out his right hand and grabbed that person's calf. He simply dragged the enemy's body up high and slammed him down on the ground with all his strength. All 6. The other 9 samurai who had retreated to a safe distance after the attack exclaimed in surprise. Kale, who was heavily injured, opened his red eyes and looked down at the young samurai who was moaning in pain. He was also dressed in a black kimono from the dojo, but the card abilities he had were far superior to those of the swordsmanship disciples. True assassination mastery, true concealed weapon mastery, true disguise mastery, poison mastery, psychological forbearance mastery. There were more than 20 green ability cards, all of which were based on extreme assassination techniques. Among them, there was a particularly eye-catching blue ability card. Super Ninja Constitution unique to Nissan Samurai, inferior version of Super Soldier. Blue ability card. Through a mixture of various poisons and hormones, it is continuously injected into the samurai's body. After enduring inhuman pain, it forcefully excavates the human body's potential, exchanging the body's lifespan for the Super Ninja Constitution. The genes in the body are unstable, and the cells will no longer age and die, showing the characteristics of a cancer patient. Obtain the top strength, speed, and reaction of a normal human, as well as the limit of a human's physical endurance and resistance. Naturally, the person's lifespan will not exceed 50 years. So, Nissan really does have ninjas. I underestimated you. Kale sneered. His right arm clamped down on the ninja's neck, and he dragged his injured body to stand up. He glanced at the ninja who was clamped down by his arm. The ninja's resistance was not bad. After the violent smash just now, he still had the consciousness to kick his feet in the air and struggle violently. Unfortunately, Kale's super soldier was an upper-level super ninja, and the mutation and evolution were more perfect. The opponent could not move his arm that was full of strength. Boss. The 8 ninjas around disguised as swordsmanship disciples looked at Hojo Maru anxiously, waiting for his instructions. Hojo Maru shook his head indifferently, ignoring the struggling ninja, holding the blood-stained cursed blade Murasame and looked at Kale coldly. You are not the original owner here. Kale squinted and asked. The original owner died a long time ago. Here are all our ninja organizations and the military disguised people. Hojo Maru said coldly, you have nowhere to run. Put down little 6 in your hand, and I can let you live to see His Majesty the Emperor. Sorry, I never accept threats from others. Kale chuckled, and his right arm was fully contracted, clamping the ninja's neck. The ninja struggled a little, and his limbs were hanging down after his neck was broken. He loosened his right arm protected by the vibrating metal arm guard and threw the ninja's body on the floor. The other 8 ninjas shouted angrily, but the next scene made them open their eyes in horror. They saw Kale standing tall and straight, and the large and small wounds on his body were quickly healing, which looked very strange. Hojo Maru, the leader of the ninja team, said as if he had expected it. Sure enough, as the surviving soldiers of the army said, what a strong self-healing ability. Kale frowned slightly. Something was wrong. The other party had long known that he had a strong self-healing ability. How could he stop the attack after a blow and let him delay the recovery time? He suddenly realized that his body was strange. He touched his back with his left hand. The cut caused by Hojo Maru on his back did not show signs of self-healing, and blood continued to gush out. Chapter 107. Cursed Blade Murasame. Mixed with sodium carbon steel metal, a Nissan blade made with ultra-high level of craftsmanship. Blue item card. The amount of sodium carbon steel mixed in it is enough to play a special effect, that is, tough and sharp, and can inhibit the healing factor of the human body, causing permanent trauma. After a long baptism of blood, the blade has a faint dark red color and a bloody smell. Kale looked at the nearby cursed blade Murasame held by Hojo Maru, and the item card information revealed on it, and he suddenly understood. The so-called bleeding cursed blade is actually a handmade Nissan blade with sodium carbon steel components. No wonder the cut left on his back couldn't be healed in a short time even with the self-healing factor. Kale was injured on his back, but he remained calm and stood in place, guarding against the remaining 9 ninjas around him. The extraordinary physique of a super ninja, coupled with the insidious hidden weapon that is impossible to guard against, it will be disadvantageous for him if he drags on. He can fight, but it's not necessary. Chirp. When the atmosphere in the hall was still in a deadlock, a loud eagle cry came from the distant sky outside the dojo, and the sound wave with its own penetrating power echoed clearly in the room. The ninjas in the dojo thought it was just an ordinary eagle and didn't care, and continued to lock Kale's body with solemn and serious eyes. Kale heard the familiar cry of the eagle outside, and his face under the hood of the venom suit changed slightly. This is a warning signal, and with this volume, it proves that there is an enemy air fighter team or a large army coming this way. It seems that I can't stay any longer. Kale quietly made up his mind and glanced around with cold eyes. At this time, Hojo Maru showed a mysterious smile again. Your physique is really comparable to a monster, and you can hold on for so long. It's just a cut. Kale frowned and stopped talking halfway. He noticed that the nerves in his body were attacked by something, and his body trembled uncontrollably. He bent down and finally could barely support himself on the floor with his claws. Our weapons are coated with paralyzing poison when they are sharpened. The amount you ingested should be enough to paralyze an adult elephant for 3 days and 3 nights. After Hojo Maru's confident explanation, Kale's eyelids sank, and his hands fell weakly to the ground and he lost consciousness. He succeeded? The other 8 ninjas saw this scene and breathed a sigh of relief. The oppressive feeling of the man in front of them was too strong, far more than any enemy they had ever encountered. As long as he was still standing there, no one dared to approach him. According to the amount of paralyzing poison in his body, there is no doubt that it has succeeded. Hojo Maru said coldly, but he didn't let his guard down. He ordered, "Small 1 and Small 2, you two go and take a look." The 2 ninjas in the team looked at each other and nodded. One on the left and one on the right, they approached the unconscious Kale. 5 meters, 3 meters, 1 meter. The 2 of them cautiously approached Kale until they were only half a meter away from him. When they discovered that he still didn't have any reaction or awareness, they were just about to breathe a sigh of relief when they suddenly heard Hojo Maru's urgent warning. "Be careful." The 2 ninjas instinctively wanted to retreat, but Kale, who was lying on the ground, suddenly flipped over and raised his hands, aiming 2 energy pistols at their chests. "Bye-bye." Kale sneered and quickly pulled the trigger. At such a close distance they could only see 2 bright blue lasers coming out of the barrel. Immediately afterward, the 2 active ninjas, under the gaze of everyone in the hall, were pierced by the lasers and opened a bloody hole in their bodies. They died on the spot and fell into a pool of blood. "Small 1 and Small 2. Hojo Maru shouted in shock and anger, and a blue laser shot toward him. He reacted quickly and waved the Murasame, and the laser was smashed in front of him and a little blue light splashed. But then, several blue lasers followed one after another, as if they were not targeting the other ninja members, but the focus of the attack was focused on him. "Waka." Hojo Maru, who had always been calm, couldn't help but curse at this time, and quickly rolled to avoid the laser shooting. However, Kale, as a sharpshooter, predicted the shooting position in advance, so that after rolling a few times, a laser still rushed to Hojo Maru's body. Hojo Maru shouted and hurriedly raised the Murasame to block. The power in his hand was not condensed, and the laser was barely defended with the blade. The impact shook the Murasame out of his hand and flew up. He got up and wanted to catch the Murasame in the air with his hand, but a black figure quickly leaped and caught the hilt of the Murasame first. Looking at Kale, who was close to him, Hojo Maru's pupils contracted, and his eyes were dim and showed a desperate look. "Forcing me to use the energy pistol, an extinct black technology consumable, it's a bit interesting." Kale whispered and fell from the air, and the Murasame in his left hand quickly chopped down. "This is a chop for you." In Hojo Maru's tragic scream, an arm flew high from his body with blood. This was the result of the crooked chop. Kale raised the Murasame and wanted to finish the chop, but he staggered and almost fell to the ground. He ignored the rest of the ninjas and rushed out of the hall alone. "Boss." The remaining 6 ninjas shouted, and all of them quickly approached Hojo Maru, who was covering the broken arm. Hojo Maru's face was pale and collapsed to the ground, his forehead was full of cold sweat. He gritted his teeth and endured the pain of the broken arm and said hoarsely, "Don't worry about me, go after the demon Kale. He has been injured and the poison paralyzes the nerves, his body is already at the end of its flight. Go, don't let him run away." "Got it. We will complete the task." The ninjas growled and followed the blood to the outside of the hall. Kale gasped, holding the Murasame in one hand and the energy pistol in the other, walked from the main hall to the yard, and almost fell into the small pool. His current situation was very bad. The paralyzing nerve poison ingested in the body was hindering the normal operation of the body and nerves, and some parts of the body began to lose feeling and motor functions. Fortunately, the self-healing factor was suppressed, but once the high-load exercise started, the paralyzing nerve poison would spread all over the body with the blood. Just now he was able to fall down and kill the ninjas, all because of the word stubbornness. "Venom, once I completely lose consciousness, you control my body and escape to a safe place," Kale whispered. Although there were still life-saving skills and cards that had not been used, he had already prepared for the worst of this battle. "He's there, don't let him run away." 6 ninjas came out of the main hall, and after seeing Kale they approached him quickly. Kale gritted his teeth and rushed to the main gate of the dojo. The moment his front foot stepped out, a dangerous breath came to his heart, driving him to take back his foot. The next moment, a shell landed at the gate of the dojo, which was right in front of Kale. Under the explosion of fire, gravel dust and blast waves swept away. Kale rolled a few times on the ground of the yard, and when he got up from the ground with dust all over his head, he was bombarded by a series of dense rocket launcher shells. The main gate of the dojo and the walls on both sides were completely flattened. Chapter 108. This was an exceptionally spectacular and shocking scene. There were ninjas chasing behind, and thousands of Japanese armed soldiers set up a line of defense in front. Countless pairs of hostile eyes and gun muzzles were focused on one person. "This is really not good." Kale in the courtyard of the dojo smiled bitterly. The original Murasame and energy pistol had been turned into cards and returned to the card space. His 2 hands were weak and hanging down, as if he had lost the thought of resistance and escape. "Demon Kale, you have no way to escape, surrender." An officer stood in the safe enough area of the large army outside and persuaded loudly. The ninjas who chased out and stopped frowned and said coldly, "Don't. This demon's means are strange and changeable, please shoot him on the spot." "But..." The officer hesitated, which made Kale shrugged helplessly and said, "Come on, do I look like I'm at your disposal?" While he was talking, he suddenly pulled out a blue item card from his hand and held it between his 2 fingers. "Some of his trump cards haven't been used yet." Trying to delay for a few seconds was just to wait for the opportunity to escape. "Now it should be almost there," Kale said in his heart. The open space where he stood was covered by clouds and cast a large shadow. The armed soldiers around seemed to have discovered something in horror, and some of them looked up to the sky in confusion. "What is that, a monster? What a big goshawk and its blue feathers. It seems to be approaching here." The officer also raised his head. When he saw the huge blue eagle swooping close to the dojo courtyard, he seemed to realize something and exclaimed, "Not good, all of you, open fire." "It's too late." Kale shook his head gently, and a powerful energy tide burst out from the soles of his feet. The invisible force pushed his body into the sky like a rocket. Air sprint. Boom, da-da-da. The intensive artillery fire was less than half a second late and fell on the place where there was still white air waves, crushing a large amount of gravel and soil into powder. Chirp! The blue eagle swooped down and arrived at the low altitude of the courtyard. It perfectly caught Kale, who sprinted to the highest point with its claws. It opened its huge wings of 10 meters and fiercely flapped. A few rocket launchers that were hastily fired from below were directly blown away by the fierce wind and exploded at a low altitude beside it. The blue eagle let out a high-pitched cry as it rushed out of the smoke and flames of the explosion. It flapped its wings in the air, increasing its speed as it carried Kyle into the midday sky. "Where is the fighter? You must stop that monster for me." The officer stared at the blue eagle that was about to disappear into the distance and yelled at the radio operator beside him. At this moment, a small black object fell from the blue eagle and smashed into the open space in front of the dojo. It was a small black ball with a green light, and it was still rolling on the ground. "What is that?" The group of armed soldiers at the front instinctively retreated. No matter how they looked at it, it looked like a grenade. But which country's grenade didn't explode after falling from the sky for so long? Is it a mute? The officer looked at the round object 10 meters away. The green light continued to flash like a countdown and soon turned red. Then there was no more. Beep beep. The round object exploded into an existence similar to a black hole and began to devour everything inside. In the blink of an eye, it rapidly expanded from the size of a fist to a huge sphere with a radius of 50 meters. Everything inside, including the ninjas, the armed soldiers, the buildings, the streets, the trees, the rocks, and even the existence of sound and light were all swallowed up. When the area regained its source of sound and light, the black hole gradually dissipated and the bright sun shone again. The scene inside Tokyo's Kanagawa district was a huge, smooth, semicircular hole in the ground with the original building as the center. Tokyo's border, thousands of meters above the sky. Kale, who was in the claws of the Blue Eagle, naturally did not know the consequences of the alien bomb. He was a little confused now, and more than half of his body was paralyzed and unable to move. Kale struggled to open his eyes, trying to find a safe place. Unexpectedly, he saw the clouds behind the Blue Eagle tearing apart, and more than a dozen single-person fighter jets were approaching at full speed. Is there an end to this? Kale had no strength to complain. His mind was muddled and his willpower and strength were fading. He wanted to sleep. The Blue Eagle cried anxiously. Under the pursuit of more than a dozen fighter jets, it grabbed Kale and fled at supersonic speed. 10 minutes later, Kale lost the feeling of strong claws grabbing his body. The cold wind blew from below. He realized that he was in a natural state of falling. What happened to the Blue Eagle? Kale squinted his eyes. Through the gap, he could see the Blue Eagle rushing into the distance and the fighter jets chasing after it. His consciousness fell asleep again. He lost control of his body and fell straight down to the huge snow mountain below. Kale didn't know how long he had slept before he gradually woke up. When he woke up, he found himself in a cave. There were caves and tunnels everywhere, and there was a hot spring next to him. Venom, what's going on? Kale whispered. He was still wearing the Venom suit. It should be Venom's credit that he could suddenly come here after falling from a high altitude. Venom proudly conveyed his thoughts to him. After a while, Kale understood the current situation. No wonder he was hungry. It turned out that 3 days had passed since the last battle. When falling down the snow mountain, Venom spread out his gliding wings and landed, and then controlled his body to hide in the cave under the snow mountain. Fortunately, I have you. Kale breathed a sigh of relief. After sleeping for 3 days, not to mention the nerve paralysis poison, even the cut on his back had healed. He took off the Venom suit and took out various hot and fresh food stored as item cards from the card space. While quickly eating to replenish his strength, he jumped naked into the hot spring next to him. Comfortable. Kale sighed. The temperature of the hot spring was just right, and it greatly eased the tension caused by the battle. That's right, this place is comfortable and safe. Kale thought of something and pulled out a rare blue creature card from the card space. Under the physical summon, an oval-shaped egg followed and soaked in the hot spring. Unhatched egg, current status, in the current environment. Time left to hatch, 33 years, 9 months and 7 days. Kale, you're a good sleeper, brother egg. 30 years, I think I'll have a son by now. Kale shook his head. After filling his stomach and washing his body, he put on his underwear and Venom suit to recover to his peak state. He followed Venom's instructions and wanted to leave the cave the way he came. After taking a few steps, he unexpectedly heard subtle footsteps in the naturally formed tunnel next to him. There are people here. Chapter 109. Inside the cave tunnel. Similar to the underground research guards, they were also holding Japanese-style guns in their hands, carefully inspecting left and right. After Kale saw that there were no accomplices behind the person, he quietly exited from the camouflage mode, rushed to the side of the person, and hit the back of the person's neck. The researcher's eyes rolled back, his body went soft, and he lost consciousness and collapsed to the ground. He didn't kill him because he had other uses. Venom, it's up to you. Kale patted the battle suit on his body with his hand, and Venom stretched out a black tentacle and spun in the air. The tip of the tentacle pierced into the back of the researcher's head. In less than 10 seconds, Venom searched through the researcher's memory, captured some information fragments, and indirectly fed it back to him through telepathy. Kyle's heart skipped a beat, as if he had just heard something unbelievable. He looked at a cave tunnel in the mountain in shock. There was a hidden underground research institute here, where almost all of Nissan's top biological scientists were gathered, and they were creating a special human called Holy Sun, under the order of the Emperor. Venom didn't know the specific details. What it searched for was only general information, and it became more abstract after telepathy. Kale was silent for a moment, and let Venom disguise the appearance of the battle suit into a full set of protective clothing including a gas mask, a white coat, plastic gloves and long boots. He then took the guns and documents from the research guard's body, and walked to the location of the Underground Research Institute. In any case, he was slightly concerned about the special human being that was mentioned. Kale followed the direction indicated by Venom. There were several naturally formed cave tunnels, and there was a man-made one in the depths. When he reached the dead end, under the identity check equivalent to a pass, the wall opened to reveal the internal elevator. After the elevator went down 50 meters, Kale arrived at the destination, and a dazzling light lit up in front of him. The huge basement was brightly lit under the lights. All kinds of advanced scientific research equipment and glassware were lined up. More than 20 researchers in white lab coats were working hard. Quick! See what's wrong with the data? 2 more Holy Sun test subjects died just now. Sigh, it's K268 and K269. Currently, only Holy Sun K208 is still alive. Sadly, it's not perfect yet. However, the radiation gene should be the one closest to its stable value now. Several biologists, ranging in age from 80 to 30, gathered together to discuss. Kale, pretending to be a guard, passed through the basement hall. No one looked at him. Their attention was focused on the data sheet and the test at hand. Kale's path was unobstructed as he walked to the innermost single rooms. He walked towards one of them as if he had a purpose in mind. In front of the isolation room, there was an exclusive guard watching over it. When he saw Kale approaching, he immediately said warily, "What's your number? Don't come near here without permission." Before he could finish his words, his mouth was suddenly covered by Kale's right hand. Kale lifted his body and slammed his head against the iron door, causing him to faint. Kale picked up the key from the guard and opened the isolation room. As soon as he opened the door, a strong smell of disinfectant assaulted his nose. Closing the door behind him, Kale walked into the room and looked up. Everything in the isolation room was reflected in his eyes. In the room that was neither big nor small, under the combination of scientific and medical equipment, there was a huge cylindrical glass tank. It was filled with a translucent liquid. Several small pipes intertwined with each other, and in the middle of it was a black-haired girl of about 7 or 8 years old. The girl's petite body was naked as if she was in a dormant state. She curled up into a ball like a cat. Her white and tender body made her look like a porcelain doll. This is the perfect result of the research? Kale frowned. He walked in front of the glass tank and pressed his left hand on the glass wall. This distance was enough for him to detect other people's cards. Sure enough, an ability card was suspended above the girl's body. Yes, there was no other white or green ability card. There was only one, dark blue card. Telekinesis, a genetic mutant's talent, telekinesis. Rare blue ability card. Mental power is 10 times stronger than normal humans. It also has the ability to quickly learn, quickly recognize, and control specific objects to move through space. The telekinesis effect is related to the distance and weight of the controlled object, as well as the strength of the controlled creature's will. Current status. Ability is unstable. Unable to draw, rare blue prefix. The Nissan people are actually creating mutants. Kale opened his eyes wide in disbelief. He looked at the talent card that was similar to Logan's. It was also a genetic mutant's talent card. Currently, it was the big universe environment of Marvel's The Avengers movie. Unlike the other series of mutants in the X-Men universe, this world was full of mutations, technology, magic, and alien myths. There were very few natural mutants. Hulk and Spider-Man were both later mutations. Black Panther was an inheritance. Those who really appeared in the movie were only the later Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and so on. They were considered pure mutants. And here there was one. Unfortunately, the signs of life are too weak. It's a semi-finished product. Kale was a little regretful. The medical instrument next to the glass tank clearly showed the mutant girl's heartbeat characteristics. The arc of the electric wave bouncing almost became a horizontal line. After all, the biological and technological level was limited. Although the mutants were created, their vitality was very weak. They could only rely on the nutrient solution to survive in a vegetative state. Once out of the experimental tank, it was estimated that they would not live for more than 3 minutes in the outside world. Worthless. Kale shook his head and turned to leave. He just walked to the door when suddenly a weak voice came into his mind. "Help me!" Kale's body stiffened. He turned and looked at the little girl in the glass tank. The other party was still floating motionlessly in the nutrient solution. Illusion? It was not an illusion. Do you want to be free? Then I'll help you. Kale smiled and walked into the glass tank again. His right hand, protected by the vibranium arm guard, clenched into a fist and hit the glass wall with all his strength. Bang! Under the impact of tons of impact, several cracks appeared on the thick bulletproof glass wall. Kale's face was indifferent as he continued to wave his right fist. The cracks continued to expand and spread, but the noise also attracted the attention of the researchers and guards in the basement. God! What are you doing? Stop. After the two researchers opened the door, they saw the scene of Kale punching the glass tank. They were so scared that they sat on the ground. Kyle acted as if he didn't hear what they said. He gathered strength in his right hand and punched the cracked glass wall with all his strength. Chapter 110. Splash. The translucent nutrient fluid flowed all over the floor. The mutated girl's body was still curled up on the ground with her eyes closed as she rolled on the floor. Kale waved his hand and took out a white item card. It turned into a large windbreaker and covered her naked body. Who are you? Let go of the test subject. Damn it. She'll die if she stays outside like this. Huddled at the door, the two researchers who didn't know what was going on cursed. Kyle indifferently picked up the Japanese gun and aimed it at them. He pulled the trigger repeatedly, and the bullets hit the medical staff's head right between their eyebrows. The noise in the isolation room quieted down again. Thank you. A weak voice came into his mind again. Kale turned around and saw that the electrocardiogram on the screen of the unconscious mutated girl on the ground was even lower. It showed that her vital signs were slipping away. Kale hesitated for a moment. He took out a white ability card without thinking too much and used it on the mutated girl's body. In just half a second, the electrocardiogram screen that was silent on the side quickly bounced into a curve with a huge contrast. In Kale's perception, the mutated girl who was originally dead on the ground became lively again. Her fair face regained its color, and her breathing and heartbeat could be clearly seen. It's working. It seems like your life shouldn't end here. Kale exclaimed. What he used just now was the rare white ability card Life Extension. It could add 3 months of natural life to a person. It was his first time trying to use it on a person who was about to die. He did not expect it to work so quickly. The mutated girl's eyelashes fluttered slightly. She then opened her big eyes and sat up with a surprised expression on her face. She then looked at Kale, who was next to her. Did you save me? Her lips did not move. She was still talking with her brain waves after she woke up. Of course. Kale squatted down carelessly and looked into the eyes of the girl who the gentleman called Little Lowly. He said coldly, Girl, do you desire life and power? Even with the mutated girl's quick cognitive ability, she did not completely understand the meaning of Kale's words, but she still nodded firmly, her small hands grabbing the trousers of the Venom suit. That's good. From now on you must listen to my orders. Kale said. The girl understood and nodded. Someone has broken into the laboratory. Behind Kale, the sound of many footsteps could be heard at the door. Several guards in protective suits were armed with firearms. They opened fire as soon as they entered the door. The bullets fell on the back of the Venom suit and bounced off. Use your ability to kill them. Can you do it? Kale didn't turn around to pay attention to the guards who had opened fire as he spoke to the girl in front of him. His philosophy was simple. I'll save you, but I won't save you for nothing. I must prove my worth here. The mutated girl opened her clear eyes. Without any hesitation, she looked at the large equipment beside the sink. The equipment seemed to be pulled by an invisible force as it floated weightlessly, but it only moved half a meter towards the enemy at the door before it lost its momentum and stagnated. You're not used to it yet. Try a smaller object. Kale suggested as he was still scratching his back from the bullets. The mutated girl nodded, took a deep breath, and looked at the broken glass on the ground again. A few pieces of glass floated lightly and quickly flew to the door, turning into sharp weapons that pierced into the hearts of the guards. Well done. Kale stood up with slight satisfaction. At the same time, the guards behind him all fell down. This was fast cognition. Perhaps it was the girl's first time killing someone, but her cognitive ability allowed her to quickly deduce in her mind. If she wanted to kill someone with a few pieces of broken glass, she needed to attack the fatal part, which was the brain or the heart. You will follow me from now on and become a sharp blade in my hand. Kale said bluntly, Do you have a name? K208. Faced with the answer, the mutated girl replied telepathically. That's not a name. Kale shook his head, looked at the mutated girl's bright and clear pupils and said, "From now on, you will be called Yu Tong Carl, and you can call me boss, or patriarch." Boss. Yu Tong telepathically transmitted her voice and simply chose one. "Learn to speak properly in the future, don't always use telepathic voice," Kale said with a headache. The girl's telepathic voice was very similar to the voice of Venom when it was symbiotic. Sometimes the two voices overlapped in his mind and buzzed endlessly. "Yes, boss." Yu Tong spoke, her voice was soft like a baby's voice. "I'll teach you the rest later, but now I'll teach you one thing, killing people." Kale smiled, taking Yu Tong, and walked towards the dozens of guards who gathered to resist outside the door. Mikado's mansion. The Mikado knelt in the hall with a haggard face, and his men quietly waited on him. He had just sent the latest news. Demon Kale was not dead, and he destroyed the Biological Research Institute next to Mount Fuji, leaving the same demon card as before. That person, is he really a demon from hell? Why can't he be killed? Ninja organizations, army, armed forces, they are all a group of... The Mikado sighed heavily. Every night he slept for the past few days, he was awakened by the dream of the semicircular cave in the Kanai area. The Mikado was silent for a long time, and finally made a decision in his heart and said softly, "Go and prepare, let the soldiers and troops still outside Nissan stop the war and withdraw to the mainland." "Your Majesty, this..." The man hesitated, not knowing whether to persuade him or not. The Mikado decisively waved his sleeve. "Go. The situation is no longer up to us. The man has only been here for less than a week and Tokyo is about to fall. If he continues to stay, Nissan won't be a country anymore. I believe the warlords and the cabinet will agree with my decision." "Yes." The man nodded and retreated. He knew that this was the precursor of the Mikado's choice to surrender. He was forced to surrender by an invader. It was very humiliating but also very realistic. As long as one faced that man, one would know how terrifying he was. Nissan mobilized the soldiers and troops on the front line of the Asian War and returned to the mainland. Although they did not openly surrender, the scene of them lowering their heads and stopping shocked all the countries in the world who were participating in the war and watching. Many countries' higher-ups were puzzled. Why did Nissan, who was arrogant not long ago, take the initiative to retreat? They sent agents to investigate and soon found the reason behind it and got a definite answer. It was that war maniac again. Demon Butcher. For the past few days Tokyo had been closed off to the outside world. Most people thought that Kale, who had gone to Tokyo alone, had died, but some Americans and Europeans did not want to believe it. Who would have thought that not only was he not dead but he was also alive and kicking in Tokyo? The main Air Force base was completely annihilated, more than half of the Bushido Foundation's dojo was lost, and tens of thousands of army soldiers and ninja organizations were killed. Too violent. After this battle, Kale had another nickname, Tyrant. And this was under the premise that Nissan had not officially announced its surrender. When Nissan surrendered and returned, Kale would be the god in the hearts of the people who yearned for peace. Chapter 111. New York, United States Senator's Office. A wine glass with more than half of the red wine slammed on the floor, and the female secretary timidly retreated to the corner. Senator Ivan's face was full of ferocity and he roared angrily, "What the hell? Is Nissan really ready to surrender?" The secretary replied, "That's exactly what our people said. The emperor is already persuading the warlords and the cabinet to announce the surrender when the army completely returns to the mainland." A bunch of trash. The power of a country can't even deal with one person. Ivan sat in his office chair, his forehead full of cold sweat, and panicked for a long time and concluded, "We must not let him come back. If he comes back, I'm afraid I'm finished. When Nissan announces the surrender in 2 days, that person will come back, and there's no way to stop this trend now." The female secretary said helplessly. "So he must die in Nissan? The army, ninja and fighter jets can't kill him then?" Ivan paused and asked coldly, "Today didn't the Strategic Research Department say that the 2 experimental nuclear weapons have basically been completed?" "Yes." The female secretary looked at him with palpitating heart and said, "But there are only 2 experimental nuclear bombs. Even if they are released in Tokyo, it's estimated that they can only cover less than half of the area." Ivan scratched his head fiercely, his veins bulging as he muttered, "Half is enough. I don't believe that luck will always be on his side. Hydra's lord and the underground undead will protect us." The female secretary continued to persuade, forcing Kale, the war hero, to Nissan, Tokyo. The United States upper echelons now feel that they have done wrong. and will never agree to use nuclear weapons again. If you make a wrong move, then you will have to follow the wrong steps in the future. Not only can you test nuclear bombs to deter other countries, but you can also accidentally eliminate a powerful competitor. They don't dare to agree and become sinners, but they won't take the initiative to reject. Ivan made up his mind, narrowed his eyes and said, "Go, use the people we planted around the upper echelons, I will guide and facilitate this matter." "I understand." The female secretary nodded. Half a day later. At the border of Nissan's Tokyo, two people, one big and one small, were walking in the wilderness. Kale's Venom suit was disguised as a hooded leather jacket, jeans and leather boots, making him look more mature and steady. The hood covered his conspicuous blonde hair. Yu Tong had her hair tied up to her waist and was wearing a Nissan kimono that was a few sizes too small. The reason was that even in Kale's rich card space, there was no children's clothing. He could only temporarily find a children's kimono in the research institute for her to wear. She kicked the wooden stool and followed behind Kale. She was 1 meter tall and didn't even reach his waist. Her exposed white skin made her look like a delicate porcelain doll. "By the way, this is for you," Kale thought for a while and took out a blue card. He then turned it into a solid form and threw it to Lin Huang. Yu Tong condensed her eyes and didn't mean to reach out to catch it. The rectangular object was suspended in front of her. It was the Rizang sword Murasame. The body of the sword reflected the cold light in the sun. Your mind control ability has to adapt to the weight of this Murasame. When you can move it freely to 10 meters away from your body, your attack ability will improve by a big step. Kale pondered and said. The control strengthened by mind control was neither strong nor weak. The weight and distance of the controlled object greatly limited the performance of this ability. If it's paired with a sodium carbon steel sword, the effect will be completely different and there will be a qualitative change. Yu Tong nodded as if she understood, as if she got a toy. Under the control of mind, the Murasame blade took her body as the axis and constantly rotated slowly within 1 meter away from her body. But in this way, why did it have a strange feeling? Kale glanced back and couldn't help but complain in his heart. He said, "Come on, try to attack me." Yu Tong raised her eyes and controlled the tip of the Murasame blade to stab his back slightly faster. Kale didn't look back. The right hand finger wrapped in the vibranium armguard flicked back, and the Murasame blade flew back. Too slow, come again. Kale shook his head gently. In fact, this speed was already quite fast. Ordinary soldiers couldn't avoid it when they were unprepared, but for him, it was really too slow. Yu Tong was a little unconvinced and continued to control the Murasame blade to attack Kale with her mind. The result was naturally a complete defeat, but in the process her mind control ability became more and more skilled. Just like that, the two of them, one in front and one behind, approached the army base in Tokyo. "Well, let's take a break," Kale said. Behind him, Yu Tong's spirit was dispirited. She consumed a lot of energy and was gasping for breath. She dragged the cursed blade Murasame with her hands. This should be the last battle in Nissan this time. Kale stood on the hillside and looked down at the large camp base on the flat ground less than 100 meters below. Nissan's top management finally loosened. As long as he stepped up the rhythm and gave the last heavy blow, this straw was enough to crush the thin camel. Kale was preparing to leave. He keenly heard a sound and turned back. At the end of the sky behind him, a B-29 bomber was faintly seen passing through the sky. Then an object was thrown down. Wait, it can't be? Kale opened his mouth wide and the worst idea flashed in his mind. He watched the object land thousands of meters away. Boom. The bright and dazzling light of the day glowed from the ground at the end of the vision. Kale's face changed dramatically. He reacted quickly and grabbed Yu Tong behind him and rushed toward the army base at full speed. Behind him, a giant mushroom cloud appeared and quickly expanded into the sky and the ground. The scorching wave of the explosion destroyed everything on the ground. Nuclear bomb. It was a nuclear bomb. Kale's eyes were bloodshot. He grabbed Yu Tong and ran as if he was racing against death. The explosion behind him was getting closer and closer. If he couldn't find enough cover, he would be directly hit by the power of the nuclear bomb on the flat ground. He would be turned into ashes before Thanos could snap his fingers. Sprint in the air. Go. Faster. Kyle stepped into the air, and his already terrifying speed increased to another level. His entire body brought with it a wave of air as he charged straight into the main base. The army base was in chaos. Countless soldiers fled in despair. Some officers just took off their shirts and committed seppuku. Kale broke into the base with Yu Tong. He quickly glanced around and saw a sealed dry well. He quickly rushed forward and used Murasame to cut the chain and jumped down with Yutong. Almost at the next moment when he jumped into the dry well, the explosion of the nuclear bomb swallowed the base above. The dust with the scorching wave poured into the dry well. Squeak, the first to scream, was Venom. Under the scorching wave of the nuclear bomb, it quickly fell off Kale's body. Kale gritted his teeth and supported himself on the wall of the well with his hands. He resisted the blast wave and radiation damage with his bare upper body. His tough skin and muscles were burned and torn by the impact and were forcibly repaired under the self-healing factor. The damage and self-healing became a torturous tug-of-war. Chapter 112. At the end of World War II in April 1944, the United States dropped 2 experimental nuclear bombs on the Tokyo-Nissan area. This was the first time a destructive weapon that could affect the World War and deter all countries appeared on Earth. The indiscriminate explosion and inhumane radiation far exceeded the previous natural disasters and viral plagues. The whole world was shocked. Under the attack of the nuclear bomb, Nissan was forced to bow down to Kale. This time they really did not delay any longer. Within a day of the nuclear explosion, they announced unconditional surrender to the world. Nissan's withdrawal from the Asian battlefield also represented the end of World War II in Marvel's human history. People all over the world cheered. The long-awaited period of peace had finally arrived. The streets and alleys of every city in the United States were decorated with lanterns and streamers and fireworks. It was 10 times more grand than Christmas in the past. Most people did not sleep and partied for 3 days and 3 nights. During this period, of course, they did not forget the greatest contributor to world peace, the war hero Kale. After the end of World War II, thousands of people waited patiently for 3 days, but there was still no sign of Kale's return from the New York military. Countless media outlets that wanted to interview were denied access to the White House and the military base. They were strictly prohibited from asking about this topic. This made the people excited and happy, but they finally noticed that something was wrong. Why hasn't General Kale returned yet? Even if the transport jet was delayed, he should have returned to America by now. God, why hasn't our superhero returned? Where's General Chester? Won't the military give an explanation? From the old to the young, the people in the United States were looking forward to it every day. The topic of peace after World War II was suppressed by the topic of, the hero Kale did not return, in just a few days. Other countries were also watching and discussing. The senior members of the United States government felt that they could not hide it from the people. They were about to discuss a cover-up that could be handled. Unexpectedly, at this moment, a piece of information began to circulate. When the United States military dropped 2 nuclear bombs on Tokyo Nissan, Major General Kale was still fighting there. No one sent a transport jet to contact him in advance. As soon as this news spread in New York, the senior management of the American Empire realized that something was wrong and wanted to suppress it. However, they still underestimated the high level of attention that the people of New York paid to Kale. In less than half a day, this news exploded in the United States like a super-large nuclear bomb. Countless people were skeptical, but at the same time, it caused an uproar. My God, if that's really the case, then Major General Kale wouldn't? War heroes can't be killed. How can they die at the hands of their own people? Our own people. I'm afraid that the country's higher-ups don't see him as one of their own, right? The White House didn't say anything. Could it be a tacit agreement? You must give us an explanation for this matter. On the morning of the second day after this news spread, countless people poured into New York City emotionally. The local people of New York formed their own team. They held signs of various sizes and paraded in the streets, causing traffic to be paralyzed in the entire city. The sea of people surrounded the White House and the surrounding senator's office building. The senior management of the American Empire panicked. They immediately mobilized the entire police force and military in New York to maintain order and quell the commotion. However, they found that many soldiers and police officers had applied for leave at the last minute. Some had even applied for resignation. They put on bright coats and held up protest signs to join the parade. At this time, the senior management of the American Empire suddenly understood how great the influence of Kale alone was. As the war hero who pacified World War II at the beginning of world peace, his prestige had undoubtedly reached a terrifying peak that even God and God had to avoid. How could the thousands of people not go crazy with anger when such an important piece of news came out at this time? On the top floor of Stark Industries, Howard, who was in a suit, leaned against the railing of the balcony. He looked at the densely packed people on the streets below and silently lit a cigarette. With your own strength, you can stand shoulder to shoulder with God. You really did it. But why didn't you come back like Steve? I was thinking that when I have a child one day, I must let you be the child's godfather. Even the business empire that we originally agreed to drink to our heart's content after the war, create artificial intelligence, develop new energy elements and build weapons and technology, all of these are going to be missed? Howard muttered to himself and kept sighing heavily. He lowered his head and smoked alone. The smoke that he exhaled drifted with the wind. Beep. Just then the phone in his suit pocket rang. How annoying. Howard put out the cigarette in annoyance. Suddenly he thought of something. He was stunned for half a second by the ringing of the phone. Wait a minute. Who else could be calling him now except for that person? Howard shivered and hurriedly took out the old phone in his pocket. After taking a deep breath to calm himself down, he picked up the phone with trembling fingers. Is this Howard? Cale's cold voice came from the other side of the phone. Cale, it's really you? Howard laughed out loud. His eyes were slightly wet. He kissed the old phone hard. Wow, don't be so disgusting. You should spread it to your bunny girls, Cale said with a chill. He hadn't seen this old gentleman for 2 weeks and he was becoming more and more improper. Aren't I just excited, buddy? Howard said happily and sadly. It's been more than a week since the war ended. You still haven't come back. I thought you really got hit by a nuclear bomb. Cale said, sorry, I really got hit by one. Howard was speechless. He hesitated for a moment and asked tentatively, Cale, are you a human or a ghost now? Nonsense, you are a scientific genius. Why do you believe in ghosts? I am now outside of central New York. There are a lot of people here. The traffic is paralyzed and I can't get in. Send that private jet to pick me up. Cale said angrily. Last time, he and Howard discussed the concept and structure of the helicopter. Before he went to Nissan, he knew that Howard had already modified the structure of the small transport jet and created the first small and convenient semi-helicopter as a private jet. He had to say, having a scientific genius friend with top-notch thinking and maxed-out practical skills, the benefits were perfectly reflected at this time. The traffic in New York City is paralyzed because of you. Howard complained to the phone. Knowing that Cale had returned safely, his previous depression and sadness were gone. Howard said with a smile, I heard that the new president, senators and military officials were forced by the unprecedented demonstration of the public. They are now gathering in front of the White House to hold a press conference to give a public explanation. That information is. As soon as Cale opened his mouth, Howard knew what he wanted to ask. He smiled and said, that's right. Nick Fry and I deliberately spread the information. We want to use the power of the public to put pressure on the American government and get justice for you. Cale's heart warmed. He paused for a moment, then said coldly to the phone, fly the helicopter over and send me directly to the White House. It's time to clean up some of the little rats who are playing tricks behind the scenes. Chapter 113. Washington, D.C., United States. Since this was not the city, New York, where the hero Cale was born, the number of people marching was not enough to fill the entire city. However, close to the city center, it was still crowded and noisy, especially in the White House Square where the high-level officials of the United States were about to make a public speech. Outside the defense line of the speech platform, the inner 3 circles were lined up by a large group of media in advance. The outer 3 circles and beyond, the end of the crowd could not be seen at a glance. Among the onlookers, a little boy about 7 years old held the mold of Cale's battle suit in one hand and the trouser leg of the uncle next to him firmly in the other. He asked uneasily, Dad, did Hero Cale really die? How is that possible? The uncle smiled and rubbed the boy's short hair hard. He said confidently and firmly, Major General Cale, he won't die. The crowd around them also laughed in unison, echoing one after another. That's right, how can a war hero die? He's a superhero, suppressing the chaos of war, a god in our hearts. Maybe he's just like the captain, just asleep somewhere and will come back when he wakes up. When they talked about Cale, their faces were full of smiles, confidence, pride, and even hope. The media on the side kept taking photos and videos, recording this rare scene. It was the first time that someone's prestige was enough to replace the gods and was worshipped by tens of thousands of people without any blemishes. He's coming, he's coming. With a reminder from the square, all the onlookers and media immediately focused their attention on the White House speech platform. The new, middle-aged, square-faced president walked in the front, leading a group of politicians in suits and generals in uniforms. Under the cover of armed soldiers, they walked out of the office building's entrance and ascended to the slightly spacious stage for the speech. Dozens of politicians and generals stopped in the rear half of the platform, their faces solemn and serious, making the onlookers subconsciously quiet down. The new president wiped the sweat from his forehead and walked forward to the loudspeaker microphone. He faced the people and media outside the police line and said in a politician's tone, "Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon." However, his words were quickly interrupted by the people below. "Mr. President, please skip the pleasantries. We're here for an explanation and the truth. Why hasn't General Kale returned?" The new president quickly covered up his awkwardness. He steadied the microphone with his hand and said, "Major General Kale, he was about to smoothly recite the cover-up that the higher-ups had discussed just now, but just as he opened his mouth to speak, he choked and stopped. The new president looked down at the countless pairs of eyes that were filled with hope and anticipation. Even with his outstanding oratorical skills, he was momentarily at a loss for words. Just as the president was in a dilemma, a spiral buzzing noise suddenly came from the sky not far away. Everyone looked up in surprise and saw a new aircraft with bamboo dragonfly wings slowly flying close to the high platform of the White House Square. The armed soldiers and guards thought it was a terrorist attack and were about to rush to the high platform to cover the retreat of the high-level personnel. But when they saw a tall figure at the door of the helicopter, they suddenly stopped. In other words, everyone below stopped moving in a daze, held their breath, and stared at the young man in the battle suit standing at the door of the helicopter. "It's General Kale." No one knew who took the lead to shout, and then the originally silent Washington Square suddenly boiled with excitement. "Our war hero has returned." The people raised their arms high and cheered with tears in their eyes. The loud sound spread quickly and soon, the entire sky above the city of Washington was filled with the cheers of the hero's return. At this time, the most embarrassed people were the high-level officials who were originally the focus of attention on the high platform. They could only applaud with a bitter smile as they watched the helicopter get closer and closer. The helicopter stopped 20 meters above the high platform and hovered in the air. Kale nodded and jumped down. He glided a little in the middle and finally landed lightly in the center of the high platform. He was dressed in a black battle suit and carried his iconic one-handed sword on his back. He stood tall and straight on the high platform. With the blessing of the superhero halo, he immediately became the most dazzling protagonist on the scene. No matter how high the status of the politicians and generals were, they had to lower their heads. The tens of thousands of people below were still applauding excitedly. The applause was thunderous. "Major General Kale, you're finally back." The president turned around and wanted to be polite. Who knew that Kale didn't even look at him and walked alone to where the senators and generals were. Faced with the approach of this killing god, even the generals who had experienced all kinds of battles had a slight change in expression, not to mention the senators sitting in the greenhouse. Their faces were pale. Among them, Senator Ivan and a few other senators who were standing at the back clenched their hands nervously and resisted the urge to collapse to the ground in fear. "Kale." General Chester sighed and stepped forward. "General Chester, as you wish, I'm back." Kale stopped and said coldly, "Kale, no matter what you've experienced, it's all my fault. Don't hurt anyone else." General Chester didn't finish his words before Kale interrupted him. "No, you're not wrong." Kale sneered. "You're just old and confused." General Chester was speechless and didn't refute. His white hair made him look like a haggard old man. The helicopter was still hovering at a low altitude. A rope was thrown down from the cabin and Fry slid down to the high platform. Howard knew that Kale had returned and immediately notified Fry. Then he rushed to the White House in Washington with him. Of course, there was a reason for doing so. "Fry, who did you find?" Kale waved to Fry behind him and scanned the senators in front of him. The senators felt a chill. They didn't know what this war hero wanted to do as soon as he returned. That one, oh, and that one." Fu Rue walked forward, his eyes sharp as he pointed out 3 counselors including Yi Fan. The 3 senators trembled. The other senators and generals didn't know what was going on, but they still subconsciously moved away from the 3 to a safe distance. Kale nodded coldly and walked towards the 3 senators. "Major General Kale, what are you doing? Don't come over." Among them, Ivan's eyes flashed with a trace of panic. He shouted and questioned, "This is the White House Square. In front of the senators and generals who represent the country, as well as the general public and the media, watch your behavior." Kale sneered and rushed in front of Yi Fan. Before the armed soldiers around him could react, his right hand had clenched into a fist and landed on Yi Fan's lower abdomen. Bang! With Ivan's body as an ordinary person, he was sent flying backward like a ball after taking the punch with a ton of force. Half of his body sank into the white wall of the office building. His body was completely crippled. He spat out blood and opened his eyes wide. Even in death, he couldn't understand how he could die in such a simple and violent way. Chapter 114. Caillou. General Chester's face was filled with shock as he looked at the dead Councilman Ivan. His lips trembled slightly, but he didn't say anything as he sighed. He was not the only one who was shocked by Cale's amazing actions. The congressman officers near the platform, the media and the people in the distance below all opened their mouths in unison. It was too bloody and violent, and the other party was a congressman. "Your tricks don't work on me," Cale whispered coldly. His eyes moved away from Ivan's body and fell on the other two congressmen who had fallen to the ground in front of him. "Help me, General, help me. He's crazy. Where are the soldiers and guards? Stop him." The two congressmen were trembling with fear, and without their previous gentlemanly demeanor, they struggled to crawl on the ground of the platform, trying to escape from the area where Cale was. Cale's face was indifferent as he continued to walk slowly towards the two. "Cale, stop it. That's a congressman. You will destroy the national order by doing this." General Chester raised his voice to persuade. "Is that so?" Cale smiled and said coldly, "If the higher-ups are infiltrated by the Hydra organization and still don't know it, then I don't mind forcibly setting things right and replacing the high-level structure with new blood." Hydra organization. General Chester's face changed dramatically as he looked directly at Cale and took a deep breath and asked, "Do you have evidence?" "If I say so, why do I need evidence?" Cale said as he came to another Hydra spy and lifted his left foot slightly. This time the other party really flew out like a ball, rolling in the air and smashing into the pit where Ivan was previously. "You are too lawless. Even if he is a member of the Hydra organization, he must be sanctioned by the law." General Chester frowned deeply. The new president also said seriously in a hurry, "Major General Cale, although you are a war hero, everything needs to be investigated by the relevant departments in detail. You can't kill a congressman on suspicion alone. Just do what you think is right. I have a clear conscience." After Cale finished, he ignored their warnings and persuasions and walked towards the last Hydra spy congressman who collapsed on the ground. "Go." General Chester gritted his teeth and looked at the congressmen with fear on their faces. He immediately made a judgment and quickly raised his arm. With a crash, dozens of armed soldiers around the platform aimed their weapons at Cale on the platform. This scene aroused the exclamation of countless people in the square. Cale paused, glanced at the armed soldiers and asked straightforwardly, "Are you also going to be my enemy?" All the armed soldiers trembled slightly and were about to put down their guns that had not been unlocked. General Chester saw this and immediately shouted, "What are you doing? You are the elite soldiers who maintain the law and order." What he was afraid of wasn't Kyle's individual strength. What he was afraid of was that with Kyle's prestige, he would be able to ignore the rules and regulations and do whatever he wanted. This is also the main reason why the high-level officials of the United States have always been afraid of Cale. The armed soldiers hesitated and raised the guns in their hands again. But in the next moment, the people in the square below have spoken in unison, "Put down your weapons. Put down your weapons. What are you doing?" Major General Cale naturally has his reasons for doing what he did. Those congressmen must be spies. You use weapons like this to deal with a war hero who has contributed to peace. The people don't know what's going on now, but they know one thing very clearly. Cale is a hero and he must be right. Whoever deals with Cale and stands on the opposite side of him is undoubtedly a spy villain of a terrorist organization. Still flying the helicopter at a low altitude, Howard in the pilot's seat listened to the voices of thousands of people who stood up for Cale and suddenly laughed. "Cale, this is the real God." Originally, he had reached the peak of a superhero. After the Battle of Nissan, the world returned to peace. Cale's prestige image in people's minds has already created a layer of God's justice golden body for him. Under the influence of this enthusiastic voice, dozens of armed soldiers looked at each other and put down the guns in their hands. Under everyone's gaze, Kyle simply kicked the last Hydra spy into the pit in the wall. The wall had completely collapsed, burying the three bodies a little. General Chester didn't say anything again. He slowly turned around with a tired and old face, bowed slightly and left the high platform in advance. The new president was silent for a moment, then his face sank slightly and he announced majestically to the public, "Major General Cale has solved the 3 spy congressmen who endangered national security. In the future, I will apply to the International Security Council to form a department to search and eliminate the remnants of the Hydra organization that are still lurking in the world. The specific matters will be supervised and implemented by Major General Kale. This was obviously something that people in the square cheered for the president's actions on the spot. The reaction was quite fast, worthy of being a president. Kale praised in his heart, walked beside the president and said to the public, "Now that the war is over, there is no longer a need for national symbols of conquest and strength. Here I officially resign from the position of Major General." Without waiting for the people and the media to react, Kale gave the new president a meaningful look and said softly, "As for the thing you said, give it to Nick Fry, he is my spokesperson." What? Fry, who was still standing on the high platform, exclaimed and was about to step forward to express his opinion when he saw Kale sprinting in the air and jumping directly to the door of the helicopter's cabin. The helicopter rose with Kale and flew towards the sky in the direction of New York. In the tide of voices of the people, Fry watched the helicopter go away and smiled bitterly. "Why do I feel like I'm being blamed by you again?" When Major Kale was in command, he led the Roaring Commandos for him. When Major General Kale was in command, he led a fleet of battleships for him. Now that Kale has resigned from the military, he thought he could take a good rest, but he didn't expect that there was still a department that had not been applied for. "Next time, I must ask him for extra pay." Fry gritted his teeth. On the helicopter leaving the city of Washington, Howard sat in the main driver's seat, while Kale and a black-haired little girl in a hoodie sat in the back. "It's still early. Do you want to go back to the Stark Industries building for a drink?" Howard suggested in a good mood. "Just take me back to where Logan is. Next time bring Fry along. There are still children here." Kale gestured to Yu Tong, who was sitting next to him. "How did you bring her back? I asked you just now but you didn't say anything." Howard asked in surprise and looked back at the cute and obedient Yu Tong. "You old gentleman, everything that comes out of your mouth is a hooligan." Kale shrugged and rubbed Yu Tong's little head. He said solemnly, "This child is also like Logan. She has a special mutant ability." At the bottom of the last well in Nissan Tokyo, he could only use his body to block most of the residual power of the nuclear bomb, but there were still explosive waves and radiation damage that attacked Yu Tong. Chapter 115. On the outskirts of New York, near the border of Queens, it was far away from the bustling big city, but it was also comfortable and quiet. Surrounded by a green forest, a large Western-style manor built in the old era sat in the open space, casting a light shadow under the afternoon sun. The helicopter flew directly over the manor from Washington and buzzed, blowing up the sand and fallen leaves as it slowly landed in the open space in front of the manor. This big movement, of course, had attracted the attention of the people in the manor. The door opened and Kyle just got off from the back seat of the helicopter with Yu Tong. With a cry of surprise, a beautiful female figure rushed out of the manor's gate and couldn't wait to jump into his arms. "Kale, you're finally back." "Lucy." Kale smiled, his handsome face showing a rare gentle smile. He sniffed the fragrance of the girl's golden hair and hugged her delicate body in his arms. Following his gaze, Logan, dressed in denim, also appeared at the entrance of the manor. He leaned against the stairs of the double-story building and also lit a cigarette with a smile. "Howard, I'm home. Would you like to come in and sit down?" Kale turned his head and greeted Howard in the pilot's seat of the helicopter. Howard smiled and declined, "You just came back. Have a good rest with your family. I'll come find you in a few days." "No problem." Kyle nodded. There were too many things that he and Howard had planned to do, and they were not in a hurry to do it now. The important thing now was to check how well Logan did with the test mission. Kale held Lucy's waist with one hand and waved for Yu Tong to follow with the other. When they approached the manor, Logan avoided eye contact and nervously put out the cigarette and stepped back into the house first. "What's wrong with Logan?" Kale was secretly surprised, but soon he understood what was going on. In the main building of the manor, there were low-key and luxurious classical lights on the roof, decorations and furniture. There were more than a dozen rooms of various sizes. 3 girls around 14 years old in servants' clothes were cleaning. When they saw Logan walking in front, Lucy holding Kale's arm and Yu Tong walk in, they were about to greet the owner of the manor, Logan. "Wait, this is the owner here." Logan coldly stopped them and waved at Kale as he said in a deep voice. The 3 girls were stunned and looked at Kale timidly. They quickly bowed their heads and bowed. "Hello, master." "Good." Kale smiled and nodded. At this time, he seemed to have discovered something and turned his gaze to one of the rooms. From there, he could faintly hear the voices of many young children. Lucy smiled and led Kale to the door of the room. The room had been renovated into a separate classroom. There was a blackboard and a desk, and a man in sunglasses was teaching a security class. Below the stage, there were more than 30 children around 8 years old listening attentively. Logan walked forward and said helplessly, "Boss, I'll explain this to you." "Explain slowly. I'm very curious. When I asked you to adopt 10 children, you evaded it left and right. Now you're actually taking the initiative to complete the task." Kale blinked and was a little surprised. How did Logan succeed in his job transition so quickly? "Uncle Wolf, where's your pride as a combatant? You've really become a nanny?" On the second floor of the manor, in the master's meeting room, Kale and Lucy, together with Yu Tong, sat on a large sofa. Logan sat alone on the other side and began to report on the mission. In general, Logan had originally followed the mission's procedures and bribed the director of an orphanage to prepare to adopt 10 children. Who knew that he would discover signs of the orphanage staff abusing the children, so he couldn't help but act. He accidentally killed the staff and demolished most of the orphanage. With the orphanage gone, most of the children in the orphanage were all adopted by Logan into the manor on his own initiative. There were 32 children between the ages of 8 and 10. He listed them as children that could be taught and nurtured. As for the rest, there were 8 children above the age of 10 who were responsible for the manor's daily chores. Orphans during the war, although young, are very sensible and obedient. Those children above the age of 10 don't meet the mission's requirements, so they can be used to replace the manor's daily chores. Logan said awkwardly. No matter what, he had violated the mission's requirements. "I have no objections. Your way of doing things can't be said to be wrong." Kale nodded. 40 children was neither too many nor too few. It was just enough to be the lowest level personnel to establish the family's power. He paused, looked directly at Logan, and said with a smile, "Also, I'm very happy that you can finally let go of your excessive defenses and be willing to accept and trust others." Lucy also smiled and said in agreement, "Isn't that so? Uncle Logan is very popular with the children here." Logan touched his nose awkwardly. During this period of time, he had indeed experienced another life surrounded by those children. Back to the main topic. Kale thought for a moment and asked straightforwardly, "Logan, what do you think I want to do by letting you adopt so many orphans?" "Family Cal, to nurture talents." Logan's response was concise and powerful. "That's right. My position for the future Family Cal is to be an extraordinary and independent private organization. It won't be responsible for external crises on Earth and will only listen to my orders." Kale said confidently. Why did he choose orphans? Because he had the ability to bestow cards. Blue grade and above cards could only be bestowed to one person. Therefore, it didn't matter if his subordinates had potential or ability. The most important thing was loyalty. When children were raised from a young age, it was easy to brainwash them into relying on and trusting the family. They would then protect and carry out orders from the bottom of their hearts. Otherwise, no matter how strong they were, like the futurists, Hichel, D. Kamartas and the others, they were all betrayed by internal members. They were almost destroyed and almost fell apart. But there's one thing you're wrong about. I'm not nurturing talents but heroes. Kale added. The heroes he was talking about were the basic abilities and qualities of heroes. The heroes in Marvel had to have abilities that surpassed ordinary people. This was basic knowledge. In his preparation for the future, the subordinates of the lowest members of Family Cal had to at least reach the level of Black Widow and Hawkeye. Otherwise, they wouldn't be qualified to call themselves members of Family Cal. When the children downstairs grow up, they will go through testing missions. Those who are qualified can stay in the Family Cal's overseas territory for a long time. They will only be the lowest ranked apprentices of Family Cal. The few of you here are the core members of Family Cal. Kale's gaze fell on Lucy, Logan, and Yu Tong. Needless to say, Lucy was his fiancée. Even if she was a weak ordinary person, her status was still higher than the others. Logan and Yu Tong were born with genetic mutations. They originally had rare blue-grade abilities. In the future, if they were bestowed with a suitable ability card, they would definitely become the cornerstone of the family's power. Chapter 116. Kale. Who is this child? In the master meeting room, Lucy's beautiful eyes fell on Yu Tong, who was sitting coldly on the soft sofa to Kale's right. From the moment they entered the room, Yu Tong hadn't moved half a step away from Kale. It was as if she was instinctively clinging to him. Although Lucy wouldn't be jealous over a child, she was still surprised by this. In fact, she wasn't the only one. Even Logan was a little confused. After all, Kale didn't seem like someone who would casually raise a child. Logan had been secretly sizing up Yutong, who was sitting across from him. The sharp animal instinct of the lone wolf gene told him that this cute little girl wearing a hood and long-sleeved sweater was far from being as harmless as she looked. "Oh right, I almost forgot." Kale suddenly remembered. He rubbed Yutong's little head and said, "Yutong, say hello to Lucy and Logan. My name is Yutong Carl. I'm 8 years old this year. Boss picked me up in Tokyo Nissan." Yutong's voice was soft and didn't pretend to be cold like before. Lucy was instantly amused. "Kale, you really know how to pick up." Lucy stuck out her pink tongue and glanced at Kale in annoyance. She seemed to be similar to a pet who was picked up from the battlefield. Wait a minute. She couldn't be a child bride too, right? Lucy thought to herself. As a woman, the way she looked at Yutong changed slightly. She had to admit that the other party was really cute. Her body was petite and delicate, her little face was like carved jade, and her skin was tender and fair. Even she had the urge to hug her like a plush doll. Yutong frowned slightly and moved closer to Kale. Seeming to have noticed her abnormality, Kale asked curiously, "What's wrong?" "She's hostile towards me." Yutong looked indifferently at Lucy and said straightforwardly. As soon as she finished speaking, the meeting room fell silent for a moment. Kale and Logan had strange expressions and looked at Lucy at the same time. This made Lucy blush and cover her beautiful face. She said, "I'll go get some drinks," and hurriedly left the meeting room. Logan reacted quickly and realized something. His sharp eyes stared fixedly at Yutong and he said gravely, "Boss, this girl can read minds? I can't hear your thoughts and I can't hear boss." Yutong was fuming. This time she spoke with her brain waves, which made Logan cover his ears subconsciously. Kale seemed to have known. After all, this was still one of the abilities of mind control. From merely controlling the spatial movement of physical entities, to breaking away from reality, to a deeper level of exploration of the thoughts of living creatures. This was only effective for ordinary people with weak minds. It had no effect on people like him and Logan who had extraordinary willpower. Object control, telepathy, telekinetic barrier, mind reading, these were the mind control abilities strengthened by mental strength. Logan. This child is the same kind of person as you. I simply call them mutants. Kale said with a smile. The current world was not like the large-scale gene mutation in the X-Men universe. There was no information about mutants. He decided to give them this definition. "Boss, are you also a mutant?" Logan asked curiously. He had always thought that Kale was the same kind of person as him. "I do have abilities far beyond humans, but I am fundamentally different from the two of you," Kale explained. "The two of you are born with genetic mutations. That is to say, the same racial talents. You were born with special superpowers. After the natural growth of the individual, some stimuli will trigger natural instincts in childhood. This kind of innate genetic instinct is similar to your claws and self-healing, Logan, or Yutong's mind control. Some people can even race against the speed of light and time, and can control metal, water, and fire." Kale paused and continued, "But I am different. My original body did not have genetic mutations. When I was a child, I was not much different from other normal people. Later, after the military's research of the super soldier drug, the perfect human body obtained through genetic modification. This kind of innate ability acquired through various drugs and radiation, I call it mutants." His super soldier ability card was copied and drawn from Steve, skipping the process of injecting the super soldier drug. "I see." Logan nodded thoughtfully. After living for more than half a century, it was the first time he heard such a novel classification of ability users. Mutants are equivalent to the second great evolution of the human species, similar to the difference between apes and modern humans. While mutants are coincidences, breaking the original genetic framework and standing on the same starting line as mutants. Kale said with emotion, "Whether it is mutants or mutants, they are all superhumans who walk alone at the forefront of human evolution history. Some of the divine races in the world of Marvel were invincible. The Rainbow Bridge spanned the universe's galaxy. They were not weak life forms similar to the original human. Through continuous racial evolution, they mastered natural abilities such as thunder and divine power, and then stabilized the altar and built the divine realm. Gods were just the top race standing at the forefront of the evolution history of the universe's species. Looking at it this way, it was obvious why the future Hulk was able to push the gods to the ground. If we can continue to evolve and become stronger, and equip ourselves with advanced technology, perhaps our family will be able to replace the realm of gods in the future." Kyle's words were truly earth-shattering. Logan, who had always been calm, was so frightened that he trembled all over. Logan said with a wry smile, Boss, it's hard to say if there are gods in this world. There may be no other life in the universe outside Earth. You haven't seen outside Earth, how do you know there are no other alien races? Maybe there is the Milky Way Alliance, the divine realm where the gods live. Kale smiled and did not reveal more. The people on Earth were still frogs at the bottom of the well. Only he, who had transformed into the goshawk in the sky, had long left the frame of the well and looked into the distance at the sea and stars outside. One day you will understand the meaning of my words. Kale returned to reality and said, let's do the initial planning for the family cow first. In 2 days I will go out with Howard and take him to a turtle-shaped island in the Atlantic Ocean for inspection. We will develop the family's exclusive base. Then I will continue to stay here? Logan scratched his head. Did he really become a babysitter? You can start teaching the children here about fighting. Kale muttered, his eyes were cold and said, after I come back you and Yutong, the 3 of us will go to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union? Yes, the Soviet Union. Kale smiled. He did not forget that during the war the Soviet Union's Secret Service training base, the Red Room organization, made some small moves behind the scenes. Chapter 117. It was morning and the gentle sunlight shone on the forest, dispersing the white fog and blurring the light and shadows. Kale was wearing long-sleeved casual clothes and sunglasses, lying comfortably on the sun chair on the lawn of the manor, basking in the sun. Venom's body also followed the chair on the grass next to the chair, rolling restlessly back and forth on the grass. It has been 3 days since he returned to New York. Without the identity of a war hero and a general, and away from the chaos and slaughter of war, his leisure time was comfortable and long. Venom, do you feel that there are slight changes in my body? Kale frowned and said to himself. The change in his mouth was not his relaxed state of mind, but his perfect physique at the peak of the super soldier. This feeling of change began to occur after Nissan Tokyo withstood the aftermath of the nuclear explosion. When he was symbiotic with Venom, this change was not very strong. Once he was separated from Venom, he could slightly feel the potential changes in his body. In the card space, he carefully sorted out the ability cards he had to change his physique, focusing on Super Soldier and Self-Healing Factor, but he did not find the reason for this potential change. Is the radiation in the nuclear explosion affecting the originally stable genetic structure in my body? Kale thought to himself. This change was too slight for his body, and he didn't know whether it was good or bad for a while. At this moment, an extended version of the black and gold luxury car drove out of the forest road and stopped in the open space at the entrance of the manor building. 2 bodyguards in suits got out of the car in advance and respectfully opened the door for Lucy and Yutong in the car. Then they began to move the supplies in the trunk. The forest where the manor was located was still a certain distance from the town. Purchasing supplies often required driving 5 kilometers away. The car and bodyguards were recruited and arranged in advance by Howard. Howard, the old gentleman, did things in an orderly manner, and Kale was still very convinced. After so many things, the two were now the closest partners. Well, in life and work. Kale, we are back. Lucy, who was wearing a sun hat, waved her hand towards the lawn. She was holding the hand of Yutong, who was a few sizes shorter than her. For some reason, the two of them had broken through the age gap and became good friends. People with the ability to read minds in the eyes of children of the same age were naturally fearful and in awe. However, with Yutong as a potential bodyguard, Kale felt more at ease when Lucy went out. A rolled-up black and white newspaper floated up from the bag Lucy was holding. It flew over like a bird and landed on the small table next to Kale. "Boss, today's newspaper," Yutong said telepathically. Kale, who was still lying down, nodded. He picked up the newspaper and quickly flipped through it. After reading 10 lines at a glance, he threw it on the table. The main content on the front page of the New York Times was the same as it had been for the past 2 days. It was all about him. Stark Industries would hold the World Science and Technology Expo a few months earlier. The report on the release of new products that would change the world was pitifully squeezed to the second page. News about the return of the war hero, the remnants of the terrorist organization Hydra lurking in the upper echelons of the United States, the confrontation between the upper echelons of the country and the civilian superheroes, the application of the youngest major general to retire from his position, and the replacement of officials and officers by the new president for Kale, etc., bombarded the United States day and night. The retirement of the war hero was one thing, and the symbol of the country's conquest and strength was no longer there. The media collectively gave Kale another title, Symbol of Peace. When he heard this new title the day before yesterday, Cale was stunned and almost spat out the red wine he was drinking. He was a war maniac. How did he become a symbol of peace? The problem was that the general public also approved of this title, far more than the previous devil, killing god, tyrant, and so on. Some people donated funds to build symbols of peace in some squares, and the Norwegian parliament was also discussing voting for him to win this year's Nobel Peace Prize. This had reached a point where Cale himself could not complain. But no matter what, from the moment he decided to build his family forces, he planned to fade out of the spotlight of the public and patiently prepare for the future alien invasion. Now, Cale did not dare to claim to be invincible even on Earth. Many large and small mysterious organizations were hidden in the corners of the world, not to mention the vast alien universe outside of Earth. The most reliable thing I have now, other than the ability to draw cards, is the preparation time that far exceeds that of other heroes by more than a few decades. I also know in advance about the major storyline events that are about to happen in the future. This is my biggest reliance as a transmigrator. In just 1 year, I have reached the highest level of the current super soldier, standing at the peak of the reputation and prestige of the human race on Earth, and holding endless wealth that can rival a country. After a few decades, where will family Cal and I go? Even I can't predict it. Cale thought to himself, and his heart was filled with confidence. Is the god very strong? Wait for me to climb up step by step. Is Thanos' Infinity Gloves invincible? Did he say that he could slowly gather 6 gems? By taking the initiative to prepare for the trump card, Cale would be innately invincible and act as the bigger boss behind the scenes, deducing and controlling everything. Now this is only the first step. Cale sat up from the sun chair, and a tall bodyguard in a suit came to the edge of the lawn, bowed his head respectfully and said, "Mr. Cale, the boss said that he has flown a plane to pick you up." "Okay, tell Lucy that she doesn't have to wait for me for lunch," Cale ordered, and after the bodyguard left, he glanced at Venom who was jumping excitedly beside him. "Are you coming or not?" Gurgle. Venom's black liquid body bounced up and turned into a hooded coat that draped over Cale's body. An hour and a half later. In the vast Atlantic Ocean, under the bright noon sun, a helicopter hovered hundreds of meters above the ground. "Cale, are we really close to the turtle-shaped island you mentioned?" Howard, who was in the main pilot's seat, asked in surprise. Cale, who was in the co-pilot's seat, looked down at the sea and nodded. "Well, almost there. Did you remember wrongly? There are no islands in the nearby sea area," Howard said with certainty. "You'll know later." Cale smiled mysteriously, and when the helicopter was 10 miles away from the sea, he pondered and said to Howard, "Next, you follow the process I said." "No problem." Howard nodded. He didn't believe that Cale could make an island out of thin air. "Now give this helicopter to me," Cale said inexplicably. Howard was stunned and quickly agreed. "No problem, I'll give it to you if you want. I'll build another one later." Chapter 118. As for the item card drawing, the drawing time was much faster than the ability card. However, at the same time, the conditions for drawing were more stringent. For example, sand, paper scraps, stones. These items could not be drawn. However, a box of sand with golden sand, paper with craft design drawings, stones with master carvings, and so on could be included in the item card drawing category. This was about the value of the item. Special items such as out-of-control fighter jets, seriously damaged firearms, unstable energy bodies, grenades and nuclear bombs that were about to explode, could not be drawn. In addition, not personal items of others. This was the first condition for the item drawing. "Hurry up." Under Cale's urging, Howard, who was still hesitating, immediately unbuckled his seat belt and moved his hands and feet from the pilot's seat to the co-pilot's seat. However, the card information did not change. It was still in the state of not being able to be drawn. Still not enough? Cale pondered. He got up and stepped forward, reaching out to turn off the helicopter's engine. The helicopter hummed slightly and began to glide downward. Howard was so scared that his face turned pale. His hands quickly grabbed the internal body of the helicopter. "It's done." Cale smiled. In his eyes, the rare green-grade, modified helicopter had changed from not being able to be drawn. "What's done?" Howard was still in a daze. However, 3 seconds later, the helicopter disappeared into thin air. The 2 people inside fell from a height of hundreds of meters and fell toward the ocean. "Oh my God, Cale, what did you do to the helicopter? Why is it gone?" Howard, who was in a natural fall, was stunned. The gentleman's hat on his head had long been thrown away by the strong wind. The mustache on his face was blown askew. He could only spread his limbs weakly and fell toward the ocean with a spread posture. This was a phenomenon that could not be explained by science. No matter how hard he racked his brain, he could not come up with an answer in time. Moreover, the current dangerous situation made it difficult for Howard to maintain his gentlemanly image and scream. "Calm down, I'm here. What are you afraid of?" Next to Howard, who was screaming in agony, Kyle also fell down. With a calm expression, he said, "If you want to work for me, then from now on, throw away your past values and ideals. I want to take you out of the shackles of the Earth's current well framework and overturn everything." As they spoke, the two of them had already fallen close to the surface of the sea. Kale suddenly reached out and grabbed Howard's suit jacket. The hood of the leather jacket spread open, a pair of dark red wings behind it. Kale lifted Howard's body and decelerated in the air with Venom's gliding ability. When he was 5 meters above the sea, he pulled out an item card and threw it down, materializing it into a modern speedboat. Kale slowly landed on the deck. He stood firm and let go of Howard. Howard held the railing of the speedboat with his soft feet and gasped for breath. After a long while, Howard finally calmed down. He stared at Kale in disbelief and asked, How did you do that just now?" "This is one of my abilities. I can store items in another dimension and use them at any time," Kale explained without hiding anything. He waved his hand and several item cards fell on the deck of the speedboat, materializing into a sun chair, a sun umbrella, a round table, red wine. This is not scientific at all. Looking at this magical scene that was like a magic trick, Howard couldn't help but smile bitterly, but he sat on the sun chair and poured himself half a glass of red wine. "I never said this was science. In fact, there are many things in this world that cannot be explained by science. In the future you may see gods flying in the sky, magic that makes people's souls out of their bodies, or even travel across the universe and back in time." Kale shrugged. He did these things not to show off, but to help Howard break through the old conceptual framework of this era. Howard was now one of the world's top engineers at the forefront of science, and his ideas were also advanced enough. However, in Kyle's opinion, the old era's technological standards and inflexible ideas were firmly restraining this noble soul that was burdened by knowledge. Across half a century, grasping the anti-gravity levitation technology, researching the Rubik's Cube, and obtaining the elemental structure diagram of new energy, this kind of technological talent is definitely not much worse than the future Iron Man Tony. The only difference is that he was born in the wrong era. Kale wants to help Howard to subvert and break the ideological constraints of the old era, and let him become the greatest help in providing advanced technology. "This is yours." Howard drank a glass first to calm himself down, then poured a glass for Kale, looked straight at him and asked seriously, "Kale, tell me the truth. Are you a god or an alien?" "Of course I'm just a human above ordinary people." Kale chuckled, picked up his glass, took a sip of red wine and said meaningfully, "But it's hard to say what will happen in the future. I will become a god and stand above the gods. Do you believe that?" "I believe. You are a person who constantly creates miracles and subverts the imagination of others. Your vision and experience often surprise me. If there is a god, I believe he will also be surprised by you." Howard laughed. "Howard Stark." Kyle looked straight into Howard's eyes and went straight to the point. "I can give you a long enough lifespan, and the family will protect you from harm for the rest of your life. I can let you see the city of the future, the scenery of Earth in the next century, and the beauty of technology in the alien universe. This really is like the temptation from the demon in fairy tales." Howard fell into deep thought and asked calmly, "What price do I have to pay?" Kyle smiled and said something that made it difficult for Howard to remain calm. "There's no need to pay any price." "Why?" Howard frowned. "Because the road I want to walk is too long and lonely. Blindly using methods to rope people in is not to my taste. If you can use scientific resources to walk beside me, then that is enough to make me feel gratified." Kale spread out his hands and said uninterestedly. The other party was one of the few people in this world that he could sincerely treat as a friend. He did not intend to use forceful methods to erase this meaning. Howard's body trembled when he heard this and said with emotion, "Kale, I misspoke just now. It's because I care too much about profit and loss as a businessman. If you can really do that, then the entire Stark Industries under my name will be given to you. I don't even mind paying any price. As long as in the future I can continue to research new scientific products and explore scientific truths, that will be enough." Chapter 119. Kale and Howard both had their own opinions and ideas, and they were decisive people who took action. Sometimes, A simple promise could be better than thousands of things and priceless wealth in the world. After opening the window and speaking frankly, Howard had tied himself to Cale's ship. If Cale sank, he would not be able to escape. If Cale floated up, he would also fly into the sky. Stark Industries, which had a background of hundreds of billions in the future, was a top enterprise empire that covered a series of industries such as military weapons, high-end technology, and biomedicine. Cale did not put Stark Industries in his eyes at all. He only had eyes for Howard, the top talent. However, he was willing to take this opportunity to let Howard get rid of his identity as a company boss and officially become a full-time scientific logistics researcher. Stark Industries will secretly belong to Family Cal's property. On the surface, you can find someone trustworthy to manage it for you. Whenever you feel tired as a researcher, you can be the boss at any time. Cale looked directly at Howard and said sincerely, "I will provide you with a big stage and enough resources to let you show off your skills and peek into the truth of science and technology." "It's a deal." Howard nodded solemnly. He knew that he had crossed the door of opportunity and chosen a path that was different from his original life track. "In that case, then let's toast to our deeper cooperation. Cheers." Cale smiled and raised the goblet that was half filled with red wine. Howard quickly picked up the wine bottle and poured his own glass, clinking it with Cale's. "Boss, I should be the one toasting you." Howard shrugged and drank the red wine in his glass first. The last time the two had a preliminary discussion about cooperation, it was at a bar in a European ballroom. They had discussed a cooperation project for 40% of Stark Industries shares. This time, the two talked about cooperation for the second time, but it was on a speedboat somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. They talked about the ownership of Stark Industries and Howard's own future. "Didn't you just say that there was no island on the map?" Cale finished the wine and put down the glass in his hand. He blinked and said to Howard, "In the future, if there is anything that subverts reality, show it. Don't hide it. It's scary." Howard smiled bitterly. "Your existence is the biggest miracle. Now, even if you directly create an island, I can accept it." "This is what you said." "Then as you wish," Cale said as he walked to the edge of the deck and looked at the sparkling vast sea. His mind fell into the card space, and he drew the purple creature card that had always been stored at the top of the creature area. It was also the only purple card that he had. Super Ancient Dragon Turtle, current status. This area fulfills the summoning conditions? Confirm summoning, Cale said in his mind. In the next moment, Howard and Cale on the speedboat both widened their eyes at the same time. Above the sea area in front of the speedboat, the figure of a giant beast suddenly appeared. Its body was so wide and tall that they couldn't see the end of it. The moment it appeared, the large sea area in front of them was shrouded in the shadow of the giant beast. The giant beast's appearance was like a snapping turtle. Its body was brown and its biggest feature was its size. It was too big. Even the giant whale of the known creatures on Earth is barely larger than one of its hands. The turtle's shell on its back was completely covered by condensed reefs and grass. It piled up into forests and mountains as if it was carrying a giant island. "Oh my God!" Howard opened his mouth wide in shock. He looked at the giant beast that Cale had summoned and took a deep breath as his whole body trembled. In front of such a creature, humans were so small that they were not even comparable to ants. Cale was also shocked. In fact, this was the first time he had summoned the ancient dragon turtle. The creature's physical form was far more shocking and frightening than what the card information had described. You should say that it was indeed a purple creature card. It was impressive. However, Cale was not in the mood to admire it. This was because when the giant turtle's body was completely summoned, it howled and its mountain-like body fell heavily into the sea below. "Cale, tell me this is not real." Howard was still in a daze. Cale, who was next to him, grabbed his arm and quickly performed air sprint. They rushed into the sky with an explosion of energy. Then the giant ancient turtle's body fell into the sea. Under its weight of tens of thousands of tons, the surrounding sea was violently slapped and waves more than 10 meters high rose in all directions. The modern speedboat that was still anchored on the sea was like a leaf that was rolling and bobbing in the turbulent sea. Soon, even the wreckage was nowhere to be seen. Cale grabbed Howard's arm and glided in the air with his wings. The water splashed up on both of them. When the waves subsided, the lower half of the giant ancient turtle's body had sunk into the sea. Only the turtle shell was exposed on the surface of the sea. Therefore it really looked like a turtle-shaped island. Howard's gentlemanly suit was wet. He spat out salty seawater and said hesitantly, "This is the turtle-shaped island you were talking about?" This was clearly the largest giant tortoise monster in history. If it was exposed, it would probably attract the attention of scientists all over the world. More or less. As far as I'm concerned, it's not much different from a normal island. The only difference is that it can move freely on the sea, Cale said. He glided forward and landed, bringing Howard into the interior of the island. You're saying that you've tamed this giant turtle? Howard asked in surprise. Yes, it only listens to me. Cale nodded. The biggest advantage of the creature card was that the summoned creatures would be forced to obey. It can be controlled. Then you can indeed treat it as a mobile island. Howard pondered and began to trek into the forest on the island. He and Cale went out to sea today with the purpose of conducting a preliminary inspection of the island and then carrying out the planning and design of the base. The wide area on the dragon turtle's back contained mountains, forests, lakes, and streams. If he had not known the true face of the island, Howard would have undoubtedly mistaken it for a normal island. Cale and Howard wandered around the island and finally arrived at the top of the island's mountain range. Looking down, they could clearly see the outline of the entire island on its back. This is the base of the base. You can make it as big as you want. Howard sighed and expressed his concern. But won't its existence be too conspicuous? Who knows if satellites or ships will see it in the future? I thought of that too. No rush. I'll deal with it when the base is ready, Cale replied. He knew that Wakanda had the technology to hide the country's future city. Chapter 120. The gigantic primordial dragon turtle stayed in the depths of the Atlantic Ocean. It had fallen into a long period of hibernation and had completely transformed into an island. Cale and Howard, who had completed the preliminary design of the base, returned to the manor in New York by helicopter. It was already late at night. When the helicopter landed in the open space in front of the manor, Cale walked out of the cabin. Coincidentally, a military jeep drove over from the forest road. The two headlights in front of the jeep shone brightly on him. Who would visit him at this time of night? Under Cale's surprised gaze, the jeep stopped in the open space next to the helicopter. A bald young man with one eye and dark skin, who seemed to have a natural camouflage effect at night, got out of the car first. He was covered in dust and was wearing a windbreaker. He smiled, revealing a row of white teeth. Fry. Cale shook his head and laughed. So it was this guy. These days, under Frey's relentless pestering of Howard, he still managed to get the location of the manor where he was living in seclusion. Cale, I haven't seen you for a few days. Fry walked over with a smile. Soon he clenched his teeth and pulled a long face. He changed the topic and said angrily, "You've retired so easily. Do you know how much trouble I've taken on for you? Capable people do more work. This is a stage for you to show your talent." Cale winked and patted Frey's shoulder to comfort him. "Come on. Anyway, you have to give me extra pay this time." Fry stared at Cale and said. Cale didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He nodded and agreed, "No problem. I'll give you double pay and an excellent employee." "Look, who else did I bring over?" Fry smiled and moved his body away. From the jeep parked behind him, a middle-aged officer with a rough and muscular body stepped forward. "Joseph." Cale smiled and hugged the burly man. He patted the man's back with a little force. Joseph and Fry. These two were his friends who had helped him a lot during World War II. They were also the military personnel who could still keep in touch with him. "Fry and I resigned, but your position was promoted." Cale teased. Joseph, who had a major insignia on his shoulder, shrugged and smiled bitterly. "It's all thanks to you, the symbol of peace. You don't know, right? General Chester resigned from his position as a 5-star general, but before that, he promoted the military ranks of all the officers who had fought alongside you. He said, if you're willing to come back, he'll apply for a 5-star general position for you." Joseph looked at Kyle with a serious expression as he spoke. Then Fry. "I can't even handle the military affairs of a major general well, let alone a 5-star general. When the time comes, I will have to trouble Fury." Cale refused calmly, not at all infatuated with the so-called 5-star general position. Fry nodded in agreement and smiled at Joseph. "I told you, Cale won't agree to return to the military. I'm just passing on a message anyway. I don't plan on pleading for General Chester." Joseph said casually and straightforwardly. "You've all come all the way here. Come in and have a seat." Cale suggested and looked at Howard, Fry, and Joseph. It was a gathering of old acquaintances tonight. The three guests nodded in agreement. As the host, Cale led them to the main entrance of the manor. "Master." The two maids in the hall on the first floor hurriedly lowered their heads to greet Cale when they saw him return. One of the girls hurriedly approached and informed, "The Wolf King and Scarlet Eye are having a duel in the backyard." "Oh, they're fighting?" Kale was surprised when he heard this. Venom, who had turned into a leather coat, also became restless. Wolf King, Scarlet Eye. These were the family code names of Logan and Yutong respectively. When outsiders were around, they would usually address them as such. "Come, let's go and take a look." Kale waved his hand and led the three to the backyard of the manor. Logan was warlike by nature, and Yutong was petty and arrogant. He had expected that the two would fight sooner or later, but he didn't expect it to be so soon. Only after a battle is it worth trusting each other's backs. Kale muttered to himself, recalling the duel with Steve at the base. That was his youth that had long passed. In the backyard of the manor, on the open lawn, under the illumination of the surrounding vintage lampposts, Lucy and 30 to 40 children sat in a circle on the lawn. This was the duel arena that the manor's family paid attention to. In the arena, an old man wearing a leather jacket and jeans was confronting a cute girl with a sword on her back. According to their age. Without a doubt, this was a cross-century duel between an old man in his 60s and a young child in her 50s. "I'm going to make my move," Logan warned. He crossed his hands in front of his chest, and 3 white bony claws extended from each of his fists. This scene caused the nearby children to cry out in surprise. Just as Logan was about to attack, Yutong suddenly stopped him with a soft voice. "Wait a minute." "Huh?" Logan was puzzled. He looked up and saw Yutong's calves moving back a few steps. "Boss said, you're a warrior and I'm a sorcerer. When we fight, we have to leave a certain space distance." Yutong said and walked to 10 meters away from Logan before stopping. Yutong imitated the usual Kale's movements. She waved her small hand, and the Murasame that was half taller than her on her back was detached from the leather scabbard under the control of her mind. It was suspended above her head with a cold light. Sodium carbon steel. Logan glanced at the Murasame with a little fear. After Kale's daily popular knowledge, he knew that the cold weapon made of this material was specialized in restraining his own self-healing factor. However, fear was fear. With his combat experience, there was no reason for him to give up the dominance of the battle. Logan let out a low growl and raised the sharp claws on his hands. He stepped backwards and charged forward. His attack method was undoubtedly the inhumanly strong body of a wild beast and a pair of bony claws that were as sharp as blades. At the moment when Luo Zhen accelerated and approached, Yutong's small face was serious. Superhuman's mind was blessed on Murasame suspended above her head. Murasame immediately swept through the night sky with a shio sound. Clang clang, the Murasame forced Logan to stop, and constantly collided with the sharp claws, making a series of crisp sounds. From a third person's point of view, this was an extremely strange supernatural scene. Logan, with his wolf-shaped claws, was locked in a tight battle with a Razang sword that moved out of thin air. "It's really troublesome." Logan was slightly irritated. He looked at the Murasame that was hit by him and entangled again. He glanced at Yutong 5 meters away from him. Chapter 121. I must attack the person who is controlled by my mind. Logan made a decision. Regardless of the pain of the bone claw, he slammed Murasame a few meters away, and then accelerated to shorten the distance with Yutong. Yutong raised her eyes. Murasame, controlled by her mind, released the momentum, and the full speed couldn't catch up with Logan's speed. "I won," Logan whispered and rushed to within 1 meter of Yutong. His arm briefly gathered strength and bowed, stabbing forward with the bone claw. Seeing that his sharp claws were about to fall, Yutong's eyes suddenly glowed with silver pupils, and her small hands slightly propped up on both sides. Boss said that everything should be left as a backup. Pung! The air explosion set off by the powerful mind power swayed out from Yutong's body surface. Logan widened his eyes and found that the bone claw was stagnant and couldn't advance half an inch. The invisible air barrier bounced off, and his whole body fell to the ground. This is the mind power barrier that is enough to withstand the aftermath of the nuclear explosion? This is too. Logan didn't have time to think more. Murasame behind him once again strengthened the offensive. The cold light of the sword forced him to roll and dodge slightly awkwardly. The grass in the place was like being crushed by a lawnmower under the sword attack, and it was bare. It turns out that the strongest one here is not Wolf King but Akame? The surrounding children booed as they looked at Logan, who had fallen into a disadvantageous position. Their gazes changed slightly. Logan realized that the situation was not good. He got up with a beautiful backflip, took the initiative to withdraw the bone claw, and grabbed the murasame that was waving in a hurry with his hands. He held the hilt of the sword in one hand, and the other hand grabbed the sharp blade without any protection. Murasame that was supported by his mind trembled and buzzed, the invisible mind power pulled and wanted to get out of it. Got you. Logan calmed down and firmly imprisoned Murasame with brute force. Yutong frowned and ran her mind with all her strength, but she couldn't take back the control of Murasame. The duel between the two began to evolve into a pure tug-of-war between strength and telekinesis. Logan dragged the violently trembling Murasame with both hands, and stepped closer step by step, regardless of the blood overflowing from his palms. Yutong raised her small face, unwilling to admit defeat. The silver light in her eyes faintly turned red, and her black hair swayed slightly as she was on the verge of losing control of her will. Just as the distance between the two was shortened to less than 2 meters, and the children on the field were holding their breaths nervously, a strong and steady voice suddenly came from outside the field. Stop, it's over. As soon as he finished speaking, Kale had already entered the battle. He quickly walked between the two of them, one hand supporting Yutong, the other resting on Logan's shoulder. Logan gasped and let go of the Nissan sword in his hand, lying back on the ground with physical exhaustion. Yutong's spiritual power was seriously consumed. She was dispirited and soft, and was hugged by Lucy, who quickly ran forward. Kale looked at Yutong in Lucy's arms and verbally educated. Murasame is given to you to improve the attack strength of your mind control, not to limit the diversity of your mind control attack. Murasame was restricted just now. You can directly give up Murasame and control other objects around you to carry out a second attack. As for you, Logan. Kale pondered and said to Logan, who was lying on the ground, mind control is just right to restrain evolution of our body, and the sodium carbon steel material is just right to restrain the self-healing ability, but you can still rely on your superhuman physique and skills to crush, and even use speed to make the opponent's judgment and reaction can't keep up with you. This battle looked like a fight between gods, but in fact, it was too clumsy and inflexible, and it didn't perfectly display the highlights of their abilities. However, after this battle, Kale also thought of the shortcomings of the two's abilities and a solution to make up for it. Although Yutong's mind control was strong, her body was still too fragile. It could be combined with the Super Agent ability card to strengthen her physique and extend her pitiful lifespan. In a one-on-one fight, if Logan didn't encounter someone like Yutong, he could definitely exert 200% of his combat power in a pure melee fight. At present, there was no card suitable for him. If there is enough adamantium, his body can enter a new height. Wolverine. Kale secretly pondered. Under his gaze, Logan had a premonition and his hair stood up. He quickly got up from the ground, covered his injured left palm, and said that he wanted to bandage it. Okay. Hurry back to rest, I still have to receive guests. Kale reminded them. Only then did the people in the manor notice that there were still 3 guests watching from outside the backyard. However, perhaps because they witnessed the inhuman battle just now, the subversion of their imagination made them feel some kind of shock, and they were still standing there in a daze. Inside the manor, in the reception hall on the 2nd floor. Kale, I thought you were the only superhuman in the world, I didn't expect there to be 2 here. Joseph exclaimed. Fry echoed, yeah. I've seen Logan before in Germany. I didn't expect him to be so strong, to be able to extend the claws of a beast from his hands to fight. Howard maintained his gentlemanly manner and smiled. He was the calmest of the 3. After seeing Kale's various abilities, he was now used to it. Go. Why don't you let Logan or that little girl help me? Fry couldn't wait to ask. What's wrong? The department that the president said last time to target the Hydra remnants lurking in the world has been built? Kale asked with a little interest. The United Nations Council has agreed to the application, but the specific procedures and projects have not yet been implemented, and the name of the department is still tentatively decided. I'm here to listen to your opinion. After all, this department was originally established because of you. Fry asked Kale, what do you think of the name, Swordsmanship Bureau? Swordsmanship Bureau? Kale, who was sitting on the sofa with his legs crossed, was stunned. The name made him recover for a long time, and he hesitated and said, would it be better to call it Gal-D? Fry and Howard were slightly stunned, and they both seemed to sadly think of a man in tights with a shield on his back. Fry agreed and said, it's fine. Then let's call it SHELD. And its full name is Homeland Strategic Defense Attack and Logistics Security Bureau. This newly established SHELD is not just for show. The president asked us to fully cooperate with this mysterious department. Some of the cumbersome political procedures are also green light. Joseph sighed. After all, it's Kale's name as the symbol of peace. Fry looked at Kale confidently and said in a deep voice, "You are now the director. With you, I believe that SHELD will become the world's strongest defense shield." Kale shook his head and said, "No one is more suitable for the position of the first director of SHELD than you. Then you should at least have a real position, right?" Fry still didn't give up and said, "Without you, HLD's strongest backer will be gone." Kale asked Howard, "Do you have a real position in SHLD?" Howard nodded and said, "They want to hire me as the Director of Science and Technology of the department, but Stark Industries is too busy, so I only agreed to be the technology consultant of the strategy department." Chapter 122. SHELD. Chief Strategy Consultant? Several people in the reception room on the second floor were stunned when they heard this, and they all had strange expressions on their faces. A symbol of peace with top combat power, as the chief consultant of the department? This was even more ridiculous than Logan being a nanny. Most importantly, even Fry didn't know that the newest HLD department had such a position. "Didn't you ask me to be in name only?" The position of chief strategy consultant is not bad on the surface. If there are any major decisions in the department, I can participate in the discussion when I have time. Kale said with certainty. He had his own ideas in mind. SHLD. Marvel was a mysterious high-end organization that dealt with supernatural phenomena and maintained world peace on Earth. It tried in vain to use ordinary agents and weapons to fight against alien invasions and even evil gods, but it was destined to be a thankless and bitter position. In essence, it was originally founded by the remnants of the Hydra organization. As the largest hiding nest in the world, the daily annihilation operations against Hydra were a classic case of a thief crying thief. It wasn't until after the 21st century when Nick Fry, as the successor of SHLD, formed the first superhero force in history, the Avengers, that it truly reflected the value of its existence. Kale didn't intend to step into the muddy waters of SHLD. Even if the new department was clean now, it had a long history and it would inevitably be infiltrated by the Hydra organization in the future. This was also the original intention of why he founded Family Cow. Only when the power was completely in his own hands could it be considered a real card and foundation. As you wish. Even if it's a nominal position in SHLD, it's better than all the resources provided by the president. Fry said helplessly with a slight headache. I'll say this first. If in the future I find out that SHLD is using a fake name to do evil things like Hydra, since I can help establish it, I can also destroy it, Kale said casually, but the domineering and indifference in his words made the reception room turn solemn. Howard raised his goblet confidently and tasted the wine. Joseph retracted his gaze in awe and fear, while Fry hurriedly wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. No one dared to question the authenticity of Kale's words, because the corpses of those who did were still lying in the graveyard of the battlefield, and weeds were about to grow out. A symbol of peace. No matter how glorious the title of a god-tier hero was, it couldn't hide the fact that it was a title that was exchanged with the lives of countless soldiers and the terrifying battle record of the destruction of countries during the dark period of World War II. In other words, it was fortunate that the people in the reception room were all old acquaintances. Otherwise, even if the new president and General Chester came, Kale wouldn't give them any face and interact with them in a friendly manner. Fury immediately made a military oath. Kyle, I'm not going to kill you. I promise you as long as I'm here, ALD will never do anything that goes against its original intention. That's good, Kale nodded calmly. ALD was a double-edged sword. If it wasn't used well, it would become a source of disaster. If it was used well, it would also be a very useful force on the surface. There were a lot of things that Family Cow couldn't do in person, but they could do it boldly through SHLD, which was recognized by the United Nations. Don't even think about Logan and you, Tom. But SHLD is still in its infancy, and it does need enough elites to hold down the fort. Kale pondered for a moment, then made up his mind and said, I have a suitable candidate in mind. Who is it? Fry hurriedly asked. Don't worry, you've seen the person before. He's still somewhere else. Kale thought for a moment, then opened a small notebook that had been covered in dust for a long time. He looked around at everyone and said, Use your intelligence-gathering methods and help me gather all the information about the Soviet Red Room tonight. The Soviet Red Room, the rumored super-secret service organization? Joseph was shocked. He seemed to have thought of something and said with even more shock, "Wait, are you going to attack them?" Fry quickly reacted and explained, "You don't know, right? The Soviet Red Room once sent female agents to sneak onto a battleship to ambush Kale during World War II. Ambush you? What are they thinking?" Howard couldn't help but laugh. Of all the people they could ambush, why did they have to target Kale, the god of slaughter? "Don't worry, I'm always reasonable and I won't attack them. I'm just going there to collect some debts." Kale smiled faintly. His words shocked everyone again. Everyone joked, "Kale is always reasonable." The night deepened. Howard, Joseph, and Fry said goodbye to each other. After they left the manor, the second floor of the building fell into a long silence. Kale silently leaned back on the sofa. Outside the door of the reception room, a big pillow was floating and moving like a magic blanket. It carried Yu Tong, who had changed into pink pajamas, to sit down beside him. "How was it?" Kale patted Yu Tong's little head and asked. "The three guests just now didn't have any bad intentions toward you, boss," Yu Tong said telepathically. "Okay, you don't have to pry into their thoughts anymore. They are all friends that you can trust." Kale shook his head. He didn't ask Yu Tong to do these things, but Yu Tong still secretly insisted on doing this. Just like what he said before, Yu Tong was his sharp blade. Sometimes, for him, she would eliminate all the potential enemies that had different intentions, including the members of Family Cow. Sometimes, the human heart is complicated and changeable. If you blindly pry into other people's thoughts, it will be difficult to make real friends, Kale told Yu Tong. "I don't need friends as long as I have boss, that's enough." Yu Tong didn't use telepathy this time. Instead, she used a soft and tender voice to say firmly. Kale couldn't help but laugh. He looked at Yu Tong and took out a blue ability card from the card space. It was a super agent that had been stored and hadn't been used on any of the family members. "Do you remember what I said when I took you out of the underground research room? Lifespan and strength, this is what you deserve." Kale held the card that others couldn't see and pressed it on Yu Tong's forehead. Under the blue light, the ability card was bestowed into the girl's body. Super Agent, bestowal successful. Card owner cannot use the ability bestowed upon the card for 3 days. Unable to bestow any ability card to this living being. Yu Tong lay unconscious on the pillow. The ability card of the Super Agent was equivalent to skipping the steps of mixing and injecting reagents and physical training to strengthen the body under rapid genetic modification. The ability of the Super Agent was the inferior version of Kale's Super Soldier. It also strengthened the body's overall development, including strength, speed, stamina, resistance, metabolism, and aging. Chapter 123. The next morning. A pile of information about the Soviet Red Room was collected by Fry and Joseph using national and military channels and passed to Howard. Howard simplified the statistics on the supercomputer and sent it to the manor via telegram. There were nearly 20 hidden locations that were suspected to be the Soviet Red Room. Many of them were probably fake information that was deliberately leaked by the Soviet Union and mixed with some military bases. The probability of the most accurate hidden location being true was less than 10%. This couldn't be helped. As a military empire, the Soviet Union was the cradle of the spy organization fully supported by the military. Other than some of the Soviet Union's top officials and internal personnel, no one knew the exact location of the Red House. This was because only the super agents of the Red House had successfully infiltrated other countries and disguised themselves as secret spies. No one had ever been able to track and locate them. But luckily, Kale had prepared a backup plan before this. When he imprisoned Natasha on the battleship, the electric shock collar that he put on her neck was the key item. That black technology was personally produced by Howard. Naturally, it wasn't an ordinary product. In addition to the high voltage that was instantly released and the anti-lock function that was difficult to remove, the electric shock collar was also equipped with a miniature positioning device. Kale was very sure that when the Red House valued Natasha so much that they sent other agents to forcibly take her back, they would definitely return directly to the Red House base and then let the professional technicians remove the electric shock collar. Before the electric shock collar lost its GPS signal, Howard was naturally prepared to collect this information. That day, Kale wanted to end the battle quickly. He ordered Logan and Yu Tong to follow him and asked Howard to arrange the fastest transport aircraft to depart from New York to the Soviet Union. At this time, the Soviet Red Room still didn't know that a big nuclear trouble was on the way. Russia's Ural Mountains, Shindy Island that extended to the north. The desolate plains were incomparably vast. Ice dregs and gravel had turned into a thick layer of frozen soil that spread across the ground. The sky was covered with dark clouds, making it look gray and hazy. By the time Kale, Logan, and Yutong arrived, the temperature in the evening had already reached -20 degrees Celsius. Even a drop of water would turn into ice. "Boss, do you think the Red House will really choose a place like this as their base?" Logan exhaled, and a ball of hot air came out of his mouth and turned into white smoke. The GPS signal was cut off in this area. There should be a man-made signal jammer. Kale fell into deep thought. He raised his eyes and looked around. All he could see was a desolate wilderness. Ever since the Battle of Nissan, the Blue Eagle had disappeared without a trace. It was as if it had been buried in an unknown corner of Tokyo along with the pursuing fighter jets. Otherwise, at this moment, it would be most useful. Just as Kale was thinking and trying to split up to search, at the end of his vision not far away, a faint light of day lit up, and a small mushroom explosion rose up with a dull sound. This feeling? Kale and Yutong's pupils contracted, and they subconsciously tensed up. For the two of them who had escaped from a nuclear explosion, this explosion scene was all too familiar. Is it a nuclear weapon? Logan was also shocked. He looked at the explosion in the distance seriously, but the three of them quickly let go of their overly tense guard. The main thing was that the mushroom explosion only covered an area of less than 100 meters before it, disappointingly, stopped. If this was considered a nuclear bomb, then a nuclear weapon was too weak. I know, this should be the Soviet Union's nuclear weapons research and development site. Kale shrugged. If they encountered nuclear explosions everywhere they went, then they were really unlucky. Does that mean we're in the wrong place? Logan asked in surprise. Yutong raised her small face and expressed her opinion through telekinesis. Not necessarily. The most dangerous place is sometimes the safest. If the Red House is around here, then the people who conducted nuclear weapons experiments here should know some information. That's right. Kale nodded and agreed with this point of view. At least the Soviet military would deliberately avoid the area where the Red House was located and conduct nuclear weapons experiments. You guys wait for me here, I'll be back soon. Kyle said as he sped up and rushed towards the unfinished nuclear test area. The wind started to blow. White, icy snowflakes mixed with black, scorching ashes fluttered in the air and landed on the hooded leather jacket that Kyle's Venom had transformed into. The ground, snowflakes, and air all carried some radiation, but compared to the large amount of invasive nuclear radiation in Nissan, it was nothing. As he approached the nuclear explosion experiment area, Kale saw many military tents built together and researchers in white protective suits coming in and out, so he entered stealth mode and sneaked over. Kale approached a researcher and with a simple chop, he knocked the other party unconscious and dragged him to the back of a tent. Without his reminder, Venom ejected black tentacles and stabbed into the back of the other party's head, forcibly searching for memories. This cooperation was quite mature and perfect. After a while, Kyle shook his head and muttered coldly, "A new rookie assistant. Even if he's dead, he's still alive. He's more valuable." However, he was not discouraged. When he saw another researcher walking towards his tent, he hid again and repeated the previous sneak attack. If it wasn't for the trouble of attracting the attention of the Soviet military, Kale didn't mind directly erasing the entire nuclear weapon experiment team. Fortunately, Venom got the memory information he wanted to know in the second person's mind. This large wilderness area was classified as the Soviet nuclear weapon experiment site. The experiment could be bombed at will regardless of civilian casualties. The only thing the higher-ups repeatedly warned was not to intervene in a mysterious place on the side. There were often a large number of young girls in plain white clothes, and from time to time, they were sent to the border between the radiation zone and the mysterious area. Only a small amount of food was left, and they were allowed to fight each other for survival in the harsh environment of extreme cold and hunger. The last surviving girl who got the food and survived for a week would be taken away by the personnel in the mysterious area. Her white clothes were dyed blood red, and she had lost her humanity. It really is the style of the Red House. Kale sneered and retreated from the radiation zone. He turned back and called Logan and Yutong, and the three of them quickly headed to the mysterious area. In the wilderness outside the radiation zone, more than a dozen corpses of young girls in white clothes were lying on the dark brown frozen soil. Some of their eyes were still wide open, and their bodies were covered in wounds and frozen into stone. On the tragic ground covered by these corpses, only two young girls survived. Chapter 124. Natasha curled up on the ground, trembling all over. She weakly tried to get up from the ground, but another girl suddenly stepped forward and sat on top of her, her hands tightly strangling the slender and fair neck under the bright red hair. The girl's face was pale and haggard. Her eyes were bloodshot and filled with wildness and madness. She roared hoarsely, "Die, why aren't you dead yet? Emily, let go of me." Natasha grabbed the other's wrists with both hands. Her desire to live was futile, and the frozen soil grazed her skin, turning it brown and purple. "Natasha, I'm begging you, stop breathing for me, you." Hearing the girl's request, Natasha trembled all over. Her only good friend, Emily, who used to be her classmate, now desperately wanted to kill her and fight for that last bit of food, as well as the chance to continue living under the rules of the Red House. This was true human nature and the cruel reality. Emotions and compassion were burdens. Only by using herself as a killing machine that abandoned emotions could she survive to the end and become the strongest agent in the organization, the Black Widow. Natasha tilted her head. In the corner of her eyes, on the desolate wilderness, there were piles of corpses of girls that had frozen solid before they could rot. A teardrop flowed out from the corner of her left eye, and it immediately froze into frost along with the blood. This was the last tear of her life. From now on, that weak female self was completely wiped out from the bottom of her heart. "Sorry, I also want to live." Natasha's face was cold. She kicked up with both legs and her surprisingly flexible body crossed her calves. Similarly, she grabbed Emily's neck and pulled her back. An eye for an eye. Emily didn't expect Natasha to still have the strength to fight back. Shocked, she used all her strength, wanting to completely cut off Natasha's breath. "Emily, you still forgot that I was the one who secretly gave you the combat lessons. If only one of us is destined to live, then let me take your share and continue on." As Natasha screamed in her heart, a cold light appeared in her eyes. She used the last bit of strength in her body. Using her wrists, waist and calves, Natasha pushed Emily's hands away. At the same time, she abruptly rolled forward, her calves clamping onto Emily's neck as she spun 180 degrees in the air. Following a clear cracking noise, Emily's neck was broken in the air. Her eyes dimmed as she fell to the ground. "I won." Natasha gasped for air. She lay on the cold ground, exhausted, and her stomach growled in hunger. She gnawed on the frozen ground with her teeth and used it to crawl and move her body. Soon, she stopped beside a small pile of black bread stained with blood and snow. Natasha didn't even think about it. She opened her mouth and bit into the small piece of black bread. She swallowed it without chewing too much. Clap, clap. A burst of applause sounded out of nowhere. Natasha looked up weakly and saw a middle-aged man in a military uniform walking towards her. "Well done. You are indeed my daughter. Now you are the real Black Widow." The man smiled happily. He didn't have the luxury of stopping his applause. "Taras." Natasha clenched her teeth. Her red hair covered her face. Her eyes were filled with anger and coldness. Taras Romanov, her adoptive father, one of the high-ranking members of the Soviet Red Room. He raised her to be a cold-blooded spy. "Very good look. You will become the strongest Soviet Red Room agent in history." Taras praised. He didn't care at all about Natasha's hatred and resentment towards him. After all, everything was meaningless after being brainwashed. Agents' emotions, memories, and even their humanity were wiped away. As long as they followed the procedures and completed the mission of espionage and assassination, it would be enough. This was the Red House. It was a powerful organization that did everything flawlessly. Taras was very confident. He stepped forward and was about to take Natasha back to the Red House. "Natasha, you look really ugly now." At this moment, a cold voice suddenly sounded from behind. When Natasha heard the familiar male voice, she tried to open her eyes. Her empty eyes regained the splendor of hope. Taras turned around in surprise. On the vast frozen ground behind him, there was a strange combination of a girl, a young man, and an uncle. The uncle had a cool buzz cut. The girl and the young man both wore hoods to cover most of their faces. "Residents nearby? Don't you know that this is a restricted area?" Taras asked coldly. His left hand pulled out a large caliber pistol from his waist. Although there were 3 of them, he also had the physique of a super agent. But the leader of the hooded youth didn't even look at him. His gaze fell on Emily. "Don't lie on the ground and pretend to be dead. Last time, you escaped from the battleship and lost a dozen of my soldiers. I haven't settled this debt with you yet. That was the work of other Red House agents. It had nothing to do with me," Natasha weakly explained. Her body was still lying on the ground. She couldn't help but laugh. She asked, "Last time you said that you wanted me to join your side. Does that still count?" "Yes." The hooded youth nodded and gave a cold and simple reply. But this one word was enough to change Natasha's current situation. She took a deep breath and narrowed her eyes. "Then take me away from here. Logan, bring her here," the hooded young man ordered. The short-haired man beside him immediately ignored Tara's, who was holding a gun, and quickly approached Natasha. "Do you think I don't exist?" Tara's was shocked and angry. From beginning to end, the three people who suddenly appeared didn't even look at him. Now they had reached a verbal agreement with Natasha and were going to take away the top agent trained by the Red House right in front of him. Terrace took the lead and stared at the approaching Logan. He raised the large caliber pistol in his hand and said coldly, "If you take another step forward, I'll shoot." Logan ignored Tara's advance. This made the veins on Tara's forehead bulge in anger. He aimed the gun and pulled the trigger. Soon Tara's realized that something was wrong. No matter how hard he tried, the trigger of the pistol seemed to be locked by a force, and he could not pull the trigger to fire the gun. "Boss, I haven't told you to move yet." The petite girl next to the hooded youth coldly looked at Tara's, her eyes shining with a silver light. Tara's expression changed. The pistol in his hand flew out of his hand and floated in the air. The muzzle of the gun was aimed at his master. At this time Logan, who was unobstructed, had already walked up to Natasha. He picked her up with one hand and carried her on his shoulder. Chapter 125. "Who the hell are you?" Tara's raised his eyebrows and raised his hands under the aim of the large caliber pistol floating in the air. He finally realized that he had kicked an iron plate this time. He looked at Natasha on Logan's shoulder unwillingly and said calmly, "No matter what, you can't take our people away. This area is the focus of the Soviet military. If anything happens, the nearest Soviet military base will send troops over." "Soviet military?" The hooded young man smiled faintly and didn't stop because of this. "Why do I feel like I've seen you somewhere before?" Tara stared at him and frowned deeply. An ominous premonition surged in his heart. "Taras." Natasha, who was on Logan's shoulder and knew that she was safe, blinked and said mockingly, "I can't believe that you're a high-ranking member of the Red House and are familiar with the intelligence of all the countries in the world. In the end, you can't even recognize the man in front of you." Taras frowned and looked at the hooded young man who was the leader of the three people. He tried to identify him from head to toe. The young man happened to look at him. The half of his face covered by the hood was handsome and cold like a knife. His blue eyes were confident and bright, revealing an indescribable sense of majesty and oppression. "Wait, you are—" He recognized him and gasped. His whole body trembled and he couldn't be more shocked. "God, why is that fiend here?" "Mr. Kale, why are you here in the Soviet Union? Prime Minister Stalin wanted to see you for a long time. The United States Ministry of Foreign Affairs didn't inform us." Taras smiled bitterly and scolded himself. He should have thought of it earlier. The only person who could make Natasha change sides and ignore the threat of the military in the Soviet Union was the man in front of him. Kale of the United States, the symbol of peace, the legendary figure who ended World War II, and the godlike superhero in the United States. "You should know that I retired from the United States military, right? I'm just representing my personal position now," Kale said as he pulled down his hood, revealing his shiny blonde hair. With a devilish smile on his face he said, "During the war your Red House owes me something. Including the interest, it's not a small amount. If you don't mind, I can go to the base near your place to sit down and talk." "I understand." Taras nodded solemnly as he broke out in cold sweat. The moment he found out about Kale's identity, he understood that this matter was not something he could handle alone. In the depths of the wasteland mysterious area, the Soviet Red Room subbase. "Officer Taras is back." The armed soldiers guarding the entrance of the base were solemn. Just as they were about to open the door to welcome them, they were stunned. Taras, who was usually arrogant and haughty, bowed his body and followed a young man to the entrance of the base. Behind him was a little girl with a sword and an uncle carrying Natasha. "What are you waiting for?" Taras glared at the guard anxiously. He wiped the cold sweat off his forehead with his sleeve and said hurriedly, "Hurry up and open the door. Also, send someone to inform the higher-ups that a distinguished guest had arrived. There are important matters to discuss." "Yes, sir," the guard hurriedly replied. This was the first time the Red House had received an uninvited guest. Most importantly, the other party's background was too great. A single mistake could cause a disaster that could endanger the country's security. World War II had just ended not long ago, and a hero who symbolized peace had taken the initiative to come knocking on their door. Anyone would be flustered, let alone the Red Room organization, who knew that they were in the wrong. Kale and the others sat down in the reception hall of the Red House's main building. The next batch of training agents were collectively called over as servants to receive them. Terrace asked for 10 minutes of discussion time and entered the conference room with the other two Red House's higher-ups. They closed the door and discussed how to deal with this emergency. The Red House has not been discovered by outsiders for so many years. How did he find it? As the highest leader of the Red House, Norris asked. That's not important anymore. Terrace held his head tightly and said irritably, what's important is that our previous sloppy mission offended Kale. Now he's brought people to our door to demand an explanation and a so-called debt. He said that he's already retired and is only representing his personal standpoint. It hasn't escalated to a conflict between countries. Just him alone, isn't that enough? The other Red House executive was very helpless. He thought for a moment and said, if we can compromise and pay a price to resolve this peacefully and ask him to leave the Soviet Union, that would be the best outcome. If it could be resolved reasonably, that would naturally be the best. After all, no one wanted to really fight with that man. The problem is, Kale is now very determined to take Natasha away. Natasha herself has also betrayed the organization and agreed. Also, under the astonished gazes of the other two, Terrace sighed and said, he said that he wants us to hand over the super agent's reagent formula. Impossible. Norris and the Red House executives' expressions changed drastically as they rejected in unison. Norris's face was stern as he said coldly, the super agent's reagent formula is the foundation of our Red House's ability to create top-notch agents. It's absolutely impossible for us to hand it over. Of course I know this, but Kale also said that if we don't bring out something sufficiently sincere, he will destroy this place in 10 minutes. No, in less than 5 minutes. Terrace looked up at the clock and said bitterly as he completed the transmission. The Red House executive's mouth was wide open as he stammered, how is this a negotiation? It's clearly a threat. Too arrogant. Norris vented his anger by slamming his fist on the conference table. The dull sound reverberated throughout the conference room. Terrace moved his mouth, but there was still one more thing he didn't say. That was, the other party does indeed have the capital and strength to threaten them. There was no need for him to say it. The three people present who could sit in the Red House executive positions were all well aware of it. After another round of discussion, when there was only 1 minute left for them by Kale, the three Red House executives finally reached a compromise. First of all, the Black Widow Natasha could be abandoned. No problem. Secondly, the super agent's reagent formula could not be compromised. Otherwise they would rather fight to the death with the other party. Even if they had to sacrifice the Red House base, they could not give the Americans the ability to create super agents. But to ensure that Kale would accept their compromise and return peacefully, the three added something else to replace the super agent's reagent formula. In the reception hall of the main building, Kale sat calmly in the seat by the window. The Red House buildings were large retro bungalows. The floor-to-ceiling curtains were all blood red in color. Under the sunlight outside, the interior was illuminated with crimson light. Logan and Yu Tong were equally unworried. They were so calm that it was as if they were in their own manner. Any one of the three of them could destroy the Red House base. If the three of them came together, it would basically ensure that the other party had no chance of making a comeback. Chapter 126. Terrace, Norris, and the executives of the Red House came out of the conference room, followed by a few female agents in tight black leather. Kale in the reception hall saw this, glanced at the clock and said with a faint smile, there are 10 seconds left. It seems that you have discussed and made a decision. Mr. Kale, we hope to resolve the conflict between us as much as possible. After all, fighting here is not good for either of us. You don't want the world to be reignited by war again after finally restoring peace, Terrace said first. This is just between me and the Red House, it has nothing to do with the United States. I believe that the Soviet Union's executives will not rashly become my enemy because of the Red House, Kale shrugged and said confidently. He still had information about the Soviet Union's nuclear tests. There were too many things he could rely on. Coupled with the huge gap in strength, the Red House could not stand on the same line as Kale to negotiate terms. We will pay a relative price as a bargaining chip. Terrace lowered his head and clenched his fists in shame. This caused Natasha, who was lying beside Logan, to raise her eyebrows. She was half conscious and half conscious. This was the first time the Red House had compromised. Kale's face was simply too big. Do you agree to give me the formula for the super agent reagent? Kale looked at the three executives with a faint smile. The Red House, who had always sucked blood from others, was willing to pluck their own hair under pressure this time? We agree to hand over Natasha and use another item to replace the formula for the super agent reagent. Terrace said in a deep voice and gently clapped his hands. A female agent behind him immediately walked forward with a reagent tube and respectfully handed it to Kale. This is? Kale asked as his eyes fell on the reagent tube. The relevant item card information instantly appeared. Unlimited formula. A reagent that can slow down the aging of various body functions. Blue item card. Allows the user to have an extremely long lifespan and peak physical fitness. Must be used continuously. One tube needs to be injected every 3 years. Once the injection stops, the body will rapidly age. Unlimited formula. A reagent of the same value as the super agent reagent, does not need to go through a long period of inhuman training, does not have rejection or side effects. As long as it's injected, it can extend one's life and stop the aging of the body. Terrace explained, but his words were concise, hiding a lot of information. For example, the unlimited formula required continuous injections, etc. However, Kale, who had read the card's information, already understood. He nodded slightly, picked up the potion formula and put it into the pocket of his leather coat. Super agent. As long as Natasha was in his hands, he would be able to draw cards and spend a lot of time to replicate the ability endlessly. The infinite formula wasn't classified as an ability card when used as an injection, but it could be given to Howard as an experimental drug for research, and the cracked version could be mass-produced. In his eyes, the unlimited formula was definitely more than 10 times more important than the super agent reagent. It was a pleasure working with you. From now on, the conflict between us has been resolved. Kale smiled gently, got up and snapped his fingers. Logan understood and carried Natasha, and Yutong also jumped down from the sofa where the soles of her feet couldn't reach the floor. Terrace sent the 3 guests out. Norris and the Red House executives secretly heaved a sigh of relief, and hurriedly let Terrace accompany them to send off the uninvited guests. At the main entrance of the Red House base, under Terrace's eager farewell, Kale and the others, under the surprised gaze of the armed soldiers, arrived at the entrance of the base without any obstructions. Mr. Kale, I'll see you off here. Terrace squeezed out an ugly smile and said to Kale, Terrace, you're really a hospitable person. The next time I come to the Soviet Union, I'll definitely come to visit you. Kale patted Terrace's shoulder affectionately, which made Terrace's face change dramatically, and he almost couldn't catch his breath. I'm kidding. If you didn't offend me, I wouldn't have the time to visit you. Kale said confidently. Terrace heard this and his face turned ashen as if he had eaten a mouthful of sh*tea. Then I'll be leaving. Kale waved his hand and stepped out of the door with Logan and Yutong. At this moment, a figure rushed out from the crowd of soldiers without warning and quickly pounced on them. Be careful. Yutong's eyes flashed with a silver light, and before she could use her telekinesis, the figure suddenly appeared in front of Kale. The cold mechanical arm quickly swung down, and the fist carried a strong wind pressure. Kale dodged sideways and only a small wound was left on his chin by the mechanical arm. The mechanical arm then hit the ground, and the cement floor immediately cracked and collapsed under the strong impact. This time, everyone saw the true face of the figure. He was clearly a tall and strong European young man. He was wearing a cool black jacket, and his long brown hair was draped over his shoulders. What was even more eye-catching was that his left hand was purely a mechanical arm, painted with a red 5-star symbol. What a terrifying strength. Looking at the half-meter radius of the cracked floor, Logan's pupils shrank. As it was inconvenient for him to participate in the battle while carrying Natasha, he could only watch the young man who launched the surprise attack and continue to attack Kale indifferently. You dare to attack boss? Yutong's silver eyes shone brightly, and the armed soldiers within 10 meters of them exclaimed. All the firearms on their bodies were controlled by their telekinesis, and dozens of gun muzzles were densely aimed at the enemy young man. Don't attack. Kale suddenly stopped them. He looked at the familiar young man in front of him and greeted him with a little surprise. Baki? Are you Baki Baines? The young man's movements were slightly sluggish, and he looked directly at Kale with his eyes through his messy hair. There were slight ripples of emotion in his eyes, but they quickly returned to being emotionless and indifferent. He continued to approach and attack Kale relentlessly. Have you forgotten me? We were once comrades. Kale said. His words were mixed with anger. It was not directed at Baki, but at the Red House who brainwashed him into a war machine. Baki acted as if he did not hear him, and launched an attack with his completely metal left arm. With the help of the mechanical performance, his punch easily broke through the impact of more than a ton. Wake up. Kale raised his eyebrows, and this time he did not dodge but punched with his right fist head-on. The fists collided, vibranium arm guard against the mechanical arm. Neither of them took half a step back, and under the loud and dull sound, a wave of dust was stirred up. Still not awake? Then I'll wake you up. Kale said coldly, and his other hand clenched into a fist and punched Baki's chest, sending him flying like a sandbag. Baki crashed into the base's wall, and climbed up from a pile of rubble and dust, looking at Kale indifferently. No one gave him any orders as a winter soldier, and even he did not know why he attacked this very familiar blonde young man. Chapter 127. To be honest, when Baki lost control and attacked, Teras, who was beside him, had a glimmer of hope that Dong Bing, who was currently the strongest in the Red House, would be able to kill Kale. However, when he saw Kale take on Baki's strongest mechanical attack head-on, Teras felt as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over his body and mind. That was a mechanical punch that was more than 10 times stronger than a human's. He took it head-on just like that? Then, when Teras saw Dong Bing, the proud masterpiece of the Red House, being bullied by Kale like a punching bag, he was completely shocked, speechless. What's going on? The other two senior members heard the unexpected commotion and hurried to the entrance of the base. When they saw Kale fighting with the berserk Dong Bing, they also secretly complained. Dong Bing, stop. As the person in charge of brainwashing Dong Bing, the senior member of the Red House was about to step forward and give an order to calm Dong Bing down. However, under the control of the gun controlled by Yu Tong, he had no choice but to stop before he could get 10 meters closer. No one is allowed to come close. Yu Tong opened her fair and tender hands. Her eyes shone with silver light as she used her transcendent being to control the situation outside the battle. She did not allow anyone to interfere with the battle between Kale and Dong Bing. Well, it was more like a one-sided bullying than a battle. Bam! In the center of the battle, Kale violently dragged Dong Bing's mechanical arm and swung him around in the air. Then he suddenly threw him out with all his might. Dong Bing, who was sent flying again, was expressionless. He landed on his feet and grabbed the cement floor with his mechanical arm. He plowed 3 trenches on the ground and managed to stabilize his body amidst a cloud of dust. Not bad. You're almost as strong as Steve, Kale commented. Dong Bing Baki's strength was about the same as Captain America Steve, who was holding a shield. Their physiques and combat skills were almost the same. The only difference was that one had the adamantium shield to withstand damage, while the other had the mechanical arm to attack. One was on top while the other was on bottom. There was nothing wrong with loving and killing each other. Kale didn't care if your offense was strong or not. When it came to offense, Team America's Winter Soldier and Black Widow were like little brothers and sisters in his eyes. Sure, Steve? When Baki heard this name, he seemed to recall something. His empty and cold eyes were filled with emotions. He held his swollen head with both hands and muttered to himself. I knew it. Even if you've forgotten my name, you won't forget Steve Rogers. Kale smiled and slowly walked closer to the Baki, continuing to guide the story. Have you forgotten? Steve is your best friend. You saved him from gangsters in the streets of New York. Steve also broke into a German factory to rescue you. Steve's name was like a key, driving Baki to hold his head and roll back and forth on the ground. It was as if a sealed memory bank was being forcefully opened. When the Red Room executives outside the battle saw this scene, they whispered urgently, "Not good, Winter Soldier's original memory is about to come back. With that man here, we can't do anything. There's nothing we can do." Another executive, Norris, shook his head and tried to persuade them. Kale looked at Baki, who was rolling on the ground, and continued to say, "You, me and Steve, the 3 of us were on a mission. You were thrown out of a high-speed train to save Steve and fell down a glacier cliff hundreds of meters high." Steve, a speeding train, a glacier cliff. Baki shuddered and his closed eyes suddenly opened. He raised his head and looked at Kale beside him. His eyes gradually regained their clarity. "Welcome back, Sergeant Baki." Kale lowered his body and extended his hand. Baki grasped it firmly with his mechanical left hand and stood up with help. His first sentence stunned everyone who heard it. "Major Kale, I didn't expect to meet you here." "Major?" Kale nodded with a strange expression. No one had called him that in a long time. Why, is there something wrong? Baki scratched his head. Logan carried Natasha over and explained, the boss was promoted to Major General a long time ago. Of course, he applied for retirement after the war ended. Major General? Wait, you said the war ended? Baki was stunned. During the time he was brainwashed by the Red House, even he didn't know that more than half a year had passed in the outside world. I'll talk to you on the plane back. There's also the matter about Steve. Kale patted Baki's shoulder comfortingly and scanned the Red House personnel around him. I can help you kill them. How about it? As the undisguised cold words fell, the armed soldiers and senior officers of the Red House turned pale and stared at Baki with trembling bodies. Baki took a deep look at the senior officers of the Red House and shook his head. Forget it. They saved my life, so I'll take it as my repayment for their brainwashing and controlling behavior. When the people in the Red House heard this, they slumped to the ground as if relieved of a heavy burden. Then let's go. Kale didn't care and stepped out of the base. Logan, Baki and the others followed. Not long after they left, the guns floating in the air of the base lost control and fell to the ground like rain. Howard's men arranged for the transport fighter returning to New York. Is that so? Steve, that guy actually... Kale, you actually ended World War II? A superhero who symbolizes peace? Baki was emotional when he saw the new information. He was both sad and surprised. He didn't expect so many things to happen in the half year he was in the Red House. He was in a daze for a long time and didn't recover from it. Especially when he knew that Steve's fighter jet crashed into the ocean and disappeared with the fighter jet. He sat in the fighter jet's seat and sighed. Logan put the unconscious Natasha on the seat. His sharp eyes seemed to have noticed something and looked at Kale's face in surprise. Boss, your chin? Kale raised his eyebrows and reached out to wipe his chin. Some sticky blood smeared on his fingers. It was the small wound caused by Baki's punch that had not healed. Sergeant Baki, right? Your mechanical arm is made of sodium carbon steel? Logan asked Baki. Sodium carbon steel? Baki muttered and raised his mechanical left arm in a daze. He shook his head and said, it's just made of mechanical parts made of stainless steel. Then why? Logan was halfway through his sentence when he was interrupted by Kale. Don't worry, I'm fine. Boss, can you get hurt too? Yu Tong asked curiously. She had seen Kale injured before, but even if it was a huge injury caused by a nuclear explosion, it would heal in just a few seconds. It's just a small injury, Kale replied calmly. He clenched his fists quietly. His heart was far from as calm as it looked. When he was still in the Red House base, he found that his self-healing ability had failed. It wasn't that it had failed, but it was temporarily suppressed by the mutation of his body and couldn't be used. Sure enough, after the nuclear explosion in Tokyo, his body had a big problem that he didn't know about. After arriving at the airport, Logan, take them back to the manor first. I'll go to Stark Industries and talk to Howard about something, Kale said. No problem. Logan nodded. Yu Tong, the telepathic ability can deal with Baki's loss of control very well. Pay attention to it. Kale ordered and walked over to knead Yu Tong's little head. Yu Tong nodded obediently and solemnly. Kale still didn't know what was wrong with his body that caused his self-healing ability to fail, so there was no need to say it and let the family cow worry for nothing. As for himself, he had to let Howard find out the root of the problem as soon as possible. It was late at night in New York, Stark Industries building, the 52nd floor of the medical research classification floor. The entire floor was quiet. Only Howard, who had changed into a white coat, was in a brightly lit isolation ward. His face was tense as he operated the medical testing equipment and was busy doing tests. Kale lay naked in the high-end medical testing chamber. His perfect body was like a work of art made of steel as green light scanned back and forth. Half an hour later, the medical chamber opened. Kale inside seemed to sense something and got up. He put on a simple shirt. Howard took off his mask and took a deep breath. He stared at Kale and said with unprecedented seriousness, some of the detailed test data haven't come out yet, but I have a general idea of your body's condition. Tell me. Kale nodded calmly. There was no panic on his face. Your body has been contaminated with a large amount of nuclear radiation. Just 1,000th of this radiation value is enough to make an ordinary person feel dizzy and have a fever on the spot. If it's more than 100th, you'll be tortured to death by illness within a few years. Howard smiled bitterly when he said this. With such a large amount of nuclear radiation in your bones, you're still alive. I can only describe you as superhuman. However, you are indeed superhuman. Your metabolism is more than 5 times that of a human. Your superhuman strength, speed, and stamina are more than 10 times that of a human. You're basically the perfect evolved version of a human. This should be the theoretical peak of the super soldier reagent's potential. There's also the unbelievable self-healing speed. Your blood contains a mysterious factor. It's because of this that the symptoms of the nuclear radiation in your body were suppressed. Howard was speechless. Cale held his chin and asked, "So you're saying that other than losing the ability to heal, my body isn't affected too much? How is that possible?" Howard frowned and shook his head. The main point isn't the symptoms caused by the nuclear radiation. Originally, your super soldier reagent was in a stable and perfect state. However, under the influence of the radiation, it's slowly breaking down, collapsing, and trying to reform. I'll mutate twice? Or should I say, a potential first mutation? Cale muttered. You still don't know the severity of the problem. You'll become even stronger than you are now without losing your natural lifespan. That's called evolution. Howard paused and slowly said with difficulty, the gene you're currently reforming will indeed induce a powerful ability. However, before the gene's reformation is complete, you'll gradually lose your ability and even your life. Genetic ability is like a flood. Even with the strength of your superhuman body, you won't be able to hold on for long. Cale's body trembled. He calmly asked, roughly how much time do I have? Less than a year. Chapter 128. Gene mutation with less than a year to live? Cale, who was sitting beside the medical pod, felt as if he was struck by lightning. He clenched his fists so tightly that his bones cracked. This was too cruel for him. He had just changed the world in the chaos of World War II nearly a year earlier. He had accumulated 500 years of life enhancement cards and had just stepped into the peak of life in this era. He had just founded Family Cal, taken control of Stark Industries, single-handedly accelerated SHLD, and had long-term plans for the next 50 years. And now, everything was back to zero. Gene mutation could not be reversed. Cale was now like a burning wheel. Unless he rushed into the sky and became the eternal sun in one fell swoop, the rest of the consequences would be to obediently wait for death and welcome the embrace of the goddess of death. Right, rush into the sky. Cale seemed to have thought of something. His dim blue eyes reignited the light of hope as he fell into deep thought. Sit and wait for death? This had never been his style. Howard, this is the infinite equation I got from the Red House. Through continuous injections, it can prolong life without side effects and stop the aging of the body. Cale said as he waved his left hand. The infinite equation medicine turned from a card to a physical substance and landed on the operating table. Howard heard this and quickly took the reagent in his hand. He said excitedly, "Then this thing might save you?" Cale shook his head gently. He did not have the heart to discourage him. This thing is useless to me. My super soldier constitution and self-healing factor can achieve the effect of the infinite equation by itself. The infinite equation, life enhancement cards, and even the sacred healing medicine senza beans from before were useless to him. After all, gene mutation was not a disease to begin with. Then this. Howard put down the infinite equation medicine in his hand in disappointment. Cale continued. This thing is prepared for you. After you research and crack it, you can try to replicate it on a small scale for yourself, Fry, and Family Cal to use. You're still considering us now? Then what are you going to do? Forgive me for not being able to think of a solution. Howard said with the pain of limited knowledge. Don't worry. I haven't given up and these aren't my last words. Cale spread his hands and said in high spirits, I want to live more than any of you. I want to see more heroes and powerful enemies in the future. Howard seemed to be infected by Cale's confidence. He asked eagerly, You have always been able to create miracles. What ideas and plans do you have this time? In my opinion, Earth has yet to solve this kind of genetic mutation biomedical level. Cale nodded. His eyes glowed brightly as he continued, That's why I can't stay here and wait for death. I want to leave Earth and fight for a chance of survival in outer space. Leave Earth and head to the universe. Howard was dumbfounded. He couldn't keep up with Cale's train of thought. That's right. Only in outer space can I save myself. Cale said with certainty. Since his current super soldier physique couldn't withstand the pressure of genetic mutation and recombination, it was better to go to outer space. There were various races of the Milky Way Alliance and the Alaskan gods who built the divine realm. They must have physique-type ability cards that surpassed the blue grade. As long as his physique evolved further, he could withstand his own genetic mutation and complete the metamorphosis of a worm into a butterfly. But how are you going to leave Earth? Humans are still at a theoretical level in the field of aviation. They don't even have the ability to reach the nearest moon. As a top scientist, Howard subconsciously used scientific theory to overthrow Cale's fantasy plan. Of course I have the confidence to leave Earth. Cale took a deep breath and also pinned this hope on the Space Origin Stone. The Space Origin Stone had the ability to open the Rainbow Bridge space tunnel and establish the law of any two places in the universe. Cale decided to bet everything on the Space Origin Stone. He gambled on this damned luck and tried to control the opening of a rainbow bridge to the ideal planet. I won't leave so soon. Before that, I will clear all obstacles on Earth for you and pave the cornerstone and road for you. Cale assured Howard that he still had at least a few months to stay on Earth and prepare to pave a smooth road to guide them to the future. Howard was a little sad, but he quickly pulled himself together and reported all the recent matters and work he had been doing recently. Mobile phones and communication, computers and the internet, these two technological products and categories will be exhibited at the World Expo. With the economic recovery after the end of the war, it will create the framework and dawn of the information age. Stark Industries can use this to leap to the position of the world's top enterprise in a few years. Regarding the construction of the family base on the turtle-shaped island, I have contacted the construction company this morning. They have secretly prepared tools, materials, and a large number of development workers. According to the design I gave, it is estimated to be completed in about a month. An old friend named Obadiah Stanley is willing to manage Stark Industries for me. The specific shares have been transferred to Family Cal's name. I can concentrate on being a logistics staff and research artificial intelligence that represents the future of science and technology. After Howard finished speaking without missing anything, Cale smiled faintly. With you in charge, I can rest assured. I don't know how Stark Industries and Family Cal will change the world in 5 years, let alone 10 or 50 years. Howard sighed and looked directly at Cale. He said sincerely, "Buddy, I will develop an infinite equation medicine so that I and Family Cal can live for a long time and see the beauty of science and technology in the future of the 21st century together. But you must come back. Promise me." Howard had a strong premonition that after Cale left Earth this time, the two of them might not be able to meet again. "I promise you." Cale promised. There were too many things on Earth that he couldn't part with. He would naturally come back alive. There was no doubt about that. There is one more thing. Arrange for someone to do it. Cale narrowed his eyes. He wanted to open up a wider technological path for Howard and Family Cal as soon as possible. "Tell me, I will arrange it immediately." Howard nodded hurriedly. "You know about Wakanda, right? It should be located in the northeast of Africa. It is an isolated and poor agricultural country." Howard pondered and answered. He didn't know why Cale would mention that backward and independent country. "It's good that you know. No matter what method you use, you must establish a friendly relationship with Wakanda." Cale gave the order. Howard didn't understand, but he quickly agreed. Since Cale valued Wakanda, there must be something good about it. Unknowingly, the proud and scientific Howard had quietly believed in Cale's words without a doubt. Chapter 129. That night, Cale rested in the room provided by the Stark Industries building. The next morning, Cale came out of the building and walked on the sidewalk in a leather jacket with a hood, letting the rising sun bathe his body. In the symbiotic state, venom can ease the genetic mutation caused by radiation, and it is now the only existence that can extend the lifespan of less than a year. Looking at the family of three talking and laughing in front of him, Cale recalled the last conversation with Howard last night. "About my body, don't tell anyone except me, including the members of Family Cal. Are you afraid that they will be worried? I think everyone should know that you are our indispensable pillar. If you suddenly leave, the sky will collapse. When I am about to leave the Earth and go to the universe, I will naturally tell them. Telling them now will only increase their troubles and worries. 3 months, I will only help you hide it for 3 months." Kyle sighed, feeling extremely unhappy. Now, he was like an old man who was entrusting his family with his funeral, hiding the fact that there was something wrong with his body. He had too many things to think about. On the one hand, he had to compete for time with death, and on the other hand, he had to spend time to build the cornerstone of the family's power. "Half a year, the time I can stay on Earth is limited to half a year at most. After half a year, I will use the space or to go to outer space and seek to win ability cards above blue quality." Cale made up his mind and walked on the modern street. Suddenly, he looked up in shock, and the surrounding city streets in his field of vision were distorted and changing. The voices and figures of the passers-by were quickly fading, and in the blink of an eye, he was in the empty and stretched barren city. This again mirror dimension? Kale raised his eyebrows irritably and looked around. Sure enough, he saw the black man who was suspected to be the caster standing not far behind him. "I am Blue, a mage," the black man said slightly arrogantly. He was wearing a simple black mage uniform, with a strange square ring on his finger and a small round stick-shaped delicate staff in his hand. "Are you the Kale that Sorcerer Supreme mentioned? I've been wanting to meet you for a long time, but you rarely come to the New York City area under my jurisdiction. Right, you must be curious about how I did it? Unfortunately for a mortal like you, it's too supernatural," Wizard Blue said proudly. However, he saw that Kale had changed into a black battle suit. He clenched his fists coldly and stepped forward. Wizard Blue suddenly had a bad feeling. "What are you trying to do?" "It just so happens that I'm in a bad mood. I didn't expect that someone would take the initiative to come knocking on my door." Kale revealed a devilish sneer. He stretched his body and slightly squatted down to accumulate strength. He stomped his foot and flew towards Wizard Blue like a cannonball. So fast. Wizard Blue's expression changed drastically. He quickly raised both of his hands, and as his staff spun, specks of golden magic brilliantly formed a circular pattern in front of him. Almost at the same time, Kale's fist quickly landed on the shield, bombarding it with golden light. Not bad. Kale licked his dry lips and looked at the rising battle intent and murderous aura of a prey. Dark sharp blades extended from his fists and fiercely stabbed the magic shield in the void. He had temporarily lost his self-healing ability, but it did not mean that he had lost the power to rule this era. Under Wizard Blue's incredulous gaze, the magic shield floating in his hands began to disintegrate. The sharp blades almost broke through his palms. Using brute force and sharp claws to shatter the magic shield? Was this a monster? Wizard Blue did not have time to think too much. He raised his hand and spun his staff. At the end of the staff, magic power condensed into tough golden threads. "Vata magic staff," he shouted softly. The staff seemed to have turned into a long whip as it swung forward, breaking through the wind. Kale dodged sideways. The long whip condensed from the magic golden threads fell on the street, burning and splashing a lot of sparks. "I know how to do that too," Kale thought to himself. He saw Wizard Blue continue to whip. He raised his left hand and retracted his sharp claws. Venom imitated his main body's black threads to form a whip. Venom battle suit long whip form. Kale whipped the long whip in his left hand. Along with the whistling wind, it tangled with Wizard Blue's magic whip. Wizard Blue was just about to pull back when he felt an unimaginable force from the magic whip. At the last moment when the staff almost fell out of his hands, he hurriedly cancelled the spell of the magic whip. "That's it." Kale pouted. He whipped the long whip in his left hand. The whip whistled through the air and struck towards Wizard Blue's body. No matter how much the wizard understood the natural order and mastered the extraordinary power called magic power, his body was still that of a normal person. How could he dare to take a hit from Kale's whip that was 10 times stronger than a human's? Therefore Wizard Blue turned around and fled without a backbone. His boots were magic tools called the Boots of Leap. When he jumped, a golden circular magic rune appeared on the soles of his feet. He could step on the void and jump as if it was flat ground. When Kale looked up, Wizard Blue had already jumped more than 10 meters into the air. "Since you're here, how could I let you run away?" Kale smiled. He cancelled the whip form in his left hand and sped towards the tall building beside him. He stepped on the walls and glass windows that were 90 degrees from the ground. He climbed and ran as if he was walking on flat ground. The distance between him and Wizard Blue was getting closer and closer. "You can't do this." He didn't use any spells. Wizard Blue was dumbfounded in the air. He looked at Kale who was running on the tall building, ignoring the laws of physics. A chill ran down his spine. "Then don't blame me, I won't hold back." Wizard Blue gritted his teeth and chanted a spell. He waved his hands behind him. The mirror dimension was not as simple as a dimension that isolated reality. Wizards could also use the rules here to control the shape of the mirror dimension. Kale ran on the wall. Suddenly he felt the space flip. The tall building he was on began to move and twist, pressing him against the ground. Soon the front of the tall building and the ground were stuck together. Kale's figure disappeared from it. Wizard Blue landed lightly on the back of the tall building. He looked down blankly at the city streets that had returned to silence. He muttered to himself, "Did I kill someone?" "You're thinking too much." A cold voice suddenly came from inside the tall building. A humanoid monster whose body was covered in black leather broke the glass of the tall building and jumped out. Wizard Blue was about to raise his staff to cast a spell when a black silk whip extended and shot out. It tightly wrapped around the round staff in his hand. Before he could finish his sentence, Kale, who was in full coverage, rushed in front of him. He controlled his strength and threw a punch. Wizard Blue's head was hit hard. His eyes rolled back slightly and he fell straight to the ground. Sigh, an idiot who sent himself to me. A mobile card drawer. Chapter 130. Someone said, "When God closes your door, he will open a window for you." Kale did not know if this was the goddess of fate's compensation. Just as he knew that he did not have much time left, an idiot mage came knocking on his door, offering warmth and benefits. Coming here? Forget about the mage profession and the superiority of magic, he just had to pick such a time to come. At this time, Mage Blue was lying unconscious in the mirror space. The word miserable was written all over his body. Let me see the magic ability you mastered. Kale rubbed his palms, staring at Mage Blue as if he was looking at a naked goddess, his eyes flashing with a faint green light. His gaze and thoughts fell on Mage Blue urgently. In just a moment, hundreds of white and green cards of varying degrees appeared densely. There were also 4 blue ability cards that appeared clearly, intertwining and setting off the blue light. 4 cards. Kale was shocked. It was the first time he saw someone other than himself with so many blue ability cards. But then he widened his eyes. A purple ability card finally leaped out from Mage Blue's body, emitting a purple glow, floating proudly above the 4 blue cards. Medium Eye Mirror Space. Enter the mirror space of another dimension. Purple ability card. Using the hanging ring, you can enter another dimension that coexists with the real universe. Although the mirror space itself existed, it was not noticed by others. The scene of the mirror space was similar to the real world, but everything that happened here had nothing to do with reality. Inside, you can secretly observe the people and things in the real world, avoid danger, and create a battlefield. You can control part of the mirror space's form appropriately. Using the skill, you can pull yourself and any creature within 10 meters, using humans as the standard, 10 people is the limit, into the mirror space. Cooldown time of the skill, 3 hours. Note: after the mirror space is damaged to a certain extent, it will be difficult to maintain stability, and the creatures trapped inside will escape back to the real world. Current status: can be drawn, requires a hanging ring artifact. Too bad it's just a skill card. Kale could not help but frown, but soon relaxed. It was not a pity. Mages did not have super green level physique ability cards, or they would not be called mages. The other 4 blue ability cards were all the same, spellcraft ability cards. Teleportation Portal Spell. Opens a circular teleportation portal. Blue ability card. Using the Ring of Suspense, he imagined a destination in his mind. The authenticity of the destination must be at least 80%. Standing on the spot for 3 to 5 seconds, he manually drew a circle and opened a small teleportation door that would span 2 places and last for 10 seconds. The teleportation distance was limited to the distance of 1 planet, Earth as the standard. There were other restrictions in outer space. Current status: can be drawn. Requires a hanging ring artifact. This spell? Kale's eyes lit up. After mastering the teleportation portal spell, the usual vehicles like cars and planes suddenly seemed too inferior and useless. Wait a minute, there's a matching set. Kale's breathing quickened. His eyes turned and his gaze quickly landed on the second blue ability card. Fixed Teleportation Portal Creation Mastery. Mastered the construction technique of fixed teleportation portals. Blue ability card. Master of the technology to create a fixed teleportation portal that can be opened to connect 2 different places eternally. Every fixed portal is eternally bound to only one location, limited to Earth. Only when the fixed portal is opened, another void portal will open at the destination. When the fixed portal is closed, the void portal will be disconnected and disappear. Current status: can be drawn. Mirror Dimension, Teleportation Portal, Fixed Teleportation Portal. Is this a set of benefit cards for reducing the distance between Earth and space planning? Kale sighed. At this time he looked at Wizard Blue again. That arrogant and dark face looked a lot more amiable. What a good person. Knowing that he needed to speed up the planning and preparation of Earth, he hurriedly gave him a series of space-related magic skills. The other 2 blue ability cards were the Wizard's basic, Magic Round Shield spell, and proficiency in using artifacts. Your spells are all mine. Kale suppressed his joy and sat down beside Wizard Blue. He began to copy and draw the 1 purple and 4 blue ability cards one by one. Blue ability card, draw distance limit of 1 meter, read time of half an hour. Kale had never drawn a purple ability card before. Now he knew, the draw distance limit did not change, it was still 1 meter, and the read time of drawing the card was as long as 3 hours. However, spending 3 hours to draw the extraordinary spell to enter the mirror dimension was still something that Kale was very happy to do. During these few hours of drawing the cards, Wizard Blue woke up a few times with his strong willpower. However, before he could open his eyes, he was punched in the back of his head and fainted again. After Kale had drawn the 5 spell cards, Wizard Blue's head was full of bumps and his head seemed to be swollen. Right, I almost forgot about the ring. Kale patted his head lightly and reached out to take off the strange ring on Wizard Blue's left hand. The ring was dark and needed 3 fingers to wear. It was 5 times bigger than an ordinary ring. This thing was like a switch to magic. It could connect people and nature, drawing out the magic hidden in the body. Without it, even if one mastered the spell, they would not be able to use it. It's time to go back. Kale pondered and remembered something. He squatted down and began to take Wizard Blue's magic equipment. Personal items could not be drawn, so he could only take them with his own hands. Scepter of the Court of Life, Vata Wand, Boots of Leap, these magic equipment were of little use to Kale. Fortunately, they could be used as blue-grade sacrificial material cards. 5 minutes later, Wizard Blue groaned in pain. He felt a strange chill on his body as he regained his senses. He woke up in shock and stood up from the collapsed building. He looked down at his body in a daze and realized that the magic tools and clothes on his body had been stripped off. All that was left was his underwear. You're awake. Kyle, who was beside him, glanced at Wizard Blue. He had just drawn the last spoils of war, the wizard robe, into a card. He stroked his chin in satisfaction. Let me think about what to do with you. He personally preferred to kill Wizard Blue. However, if the Ancient One found out, the relationship between them would inevitably be strained. Got it? The corners of Kyle's mouth rose, he waved his left hand, and the canned food for 10 people turned into a solid pile on the ground and said, "This is for you. I hope Ancient One can notice that you are in the mirror dimension before you finish eating the food and come to pick you up." What are you talking about? Wizard Blue got up in a panic and tried to persuade him. Without me you won't be able to leave this place. Who said so? Kyle put on the hanging ring on his right hand. Under Wizard Blue's stunned gaze, he waved both of his palms. Bright sparks began to appear, spinning into a wheel in the air in front of him, opening a portal to the real world. How is this possible? You know magic too? Wizard Blue was stunned. He doubted his own eyes and worldview. Sorry, I'm actually a wizard too. Kyle smiled and stepped into the splendid door of Mars's spinning light. Chapter 131. On the outskirts of New York, family Cal's manor. Don't let go, suppress him. Under the trembling gaze of the children in the second-floor corridor, the spacious hall on the first floor was noisy and chaotic, as if a fierce battle was unfolding. 4 or 5 elite bodyguards in suits and sunglasses flew out from the center of the battle, clutching broken military ropes. They rolled on the ground and screamed. Normal ropes won't be able to bind him, send someone to get the chains. Logan's face was flushed in the middle of the battle. He extended his bony claws and firmly clamped Baki's strong arms from behind. Baki's hair was disheveled, and he was like a wild beast that had lost control. He roared and struggled madly. Under the confrontation between the two of them, the gorgeous floor under their feet almost cracked. I can't hold on much longer, Logan reminded. Baki waved his mechanical left arm and slammed it down on the floor, using brute force to throw Logan forward. Let me. Natasha, with her bright red hair, flew forward in time and dragged a 10-meter-long chain, quickly wrapping it around Baki's neck. Baki pretended to attack, but Natasha nimbly dodged from his side. She circled around Baki's waist and neck a few times. In the end, Natasha, who was wearing a long dress, knelt on Baki's broad back. She used all her strength to pull back the ends of the chain, and the chains clicked as they tightened. Natasha said in a low voice, "Baki, hurry and remember your identity. Don't let your false memories corrupt your mind." Baki turned a deaf ear to her words. His eyes were cold and empty. He pulled with all his strength, and the chain in Natasha's hands was slowly pulled away. Get out of the way. The chain was about to break. Logan roared and suddenly rushed toward Baki. Natasha reacted and jumped away. In the next moment, Baki, who was wrapped in chains, was sent flying by Logan. He flew a few meters and fell out of the main entrance of the building. He rolled down the stone steps and onto the lawn of the manor. Baki climbed up in silence. He pulled the chain from his body and moved to leave the manor alone. We can't let him leave in this state. Logan and Natasha looked at each other. They were about to get up and chase after him, but suddenly, they saw the chain on Baki's body float quickly. Crash! The iron chain turned into a living snake, automatically binding Buggy's limbs. Finally, the two ends of the iron chain were nailed into the grass beside him. Natasha, who had just come out of the hall, looked up in surprise. She saw that the limousine, which had gone out to purchase supplies, had stopped in the yard. As the mistress of the manor, Lucy, and the number 2 fighter, Yutong, had just come out of the limousine. Yutong slightly raised her white and tender hand. Her silver eyes looked straight at Baki, who had lost control of the chain. Obviously, she had controlled the chain in time with her mind. Beautifully done. Logan breathed a sigh of relief. He finally understood why Kale had asked Yutong to keep an eye on Baki. Under the circumstances of not hurting him too much, it was better to restrict his movements with mind power. What should we do now? Trap him like this? The people in the manor were troubled by the out-of-control Baki. At this moment, sparks suddenly lit up from the main gate of the manor. The dazzling and spinning lights formed a circular door that allowed people to pass through. Kale, who was wearing a black combat suit, walked out of it. Kale? Boss. Family head. Boss. Different names suddenly sounded in the manor. The young man who had just returned was the foundation and the backbone of the family Cal. There was no doubt about this. Boss, how did you come back? Logan asked on behalf of everyone present. The magical portal behind Kale was gradually dissipating. From it, they could vaguely see the rooftops of high-rise buildings in New York and the vague noises of people on the other side. This is a spell. I'll tell you later. Kale looked around and saw Baki, who was chained in front of the main gate. He frowned and asked, "Did he lose control?" Logan nodded. The first floor of the manor was full of serious marks caused by the winter soldiers losing control. Needless to say, it was obvious how intense it was just now. Kale looked at Baki, who was tied up, and raised his hand with the hanging ring. As he kept spinning, a circle of sparks appeared on the lawn under Baki's feet. Yutong let him go. Okay. Yutong used her mind to loosen the two ends of the iron chain. Before Baki could struggle to move half a step, he fell into the portal. The circle of sparks also disappeared. Everyone present blinked, not knowing what Kale had done. Let him get some fresh air and wake him up. After Kale finished speaking, he looked at Natasha and pondered about what to do with her. Natasha couldn't help but take a few steps back. Even the top agents were like little lambs in front of the young man in front of her. However, she quickly came to her senses and stopped. After all, no one forced her to join them. In half an hour, there will be a family meeting in the hall on the second floor. I have something to tell you. As Kale spoke, he opened another portal. On the other side was the master meeting room on the second floor of the manor building. Natasha, come with me. Kale walked into the portal, and Natasha obediently followed behind him, leaving behind the members of Family Cal who were full of admiration. It had to be said that with the magic portal, not only did it save a lot of travel time, it also raised the level of pretentiousness by more than one level. It was a means of movement exclusive to mages. Other than the shorter distance and the smaller entrance, it was not inferior to the appearance of the Rainbow Bridges toner. In the master meeting room on the second floor. Kale, who was sitting in the office chair, tapped his fingers lightly on the table and said directly, "I don't completely trust you. You betrayed the Red House. One day, under the pressure of a stronger force, you may betray me. Then why did you save me?" Natasha bit her lower lip lightly and sat down calmly on the sofa. She had experienced being used and abandoned many times. She had long been used to the feeling of not being trusted. She was far from the weak and powerless girl she looked like on the outside. She was a true Black Widow. Once her temperament, memories, and past experiences were tainted, it was difficult to clean them up. Because you still have value to me. Moreover, the consequences of your betrayal will not be able to escape Family Cal's pursuit as long as you are on Earth. Kale said in a confident tone. Natasha believed him without a doubt. Kale continued, "In these 2 months you must stay in the manor. You are not allowed to leave even half a step. Come see me once every 3 days for half an hour." Oh, what? When Natasha heard this, her beautiful eyes blinked strangely. An inexplicable sense of anticipation welled up in her heart. If Kale took a liking to her, she wouldn't mind. In 2 months I will recommend you to Nick Frey's side and work at the newly established SLD. Whether you can gain the recognition of my family's forces and clean up the stains on your body will all depend on your performance. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.